The Last Seer of Tyr'esya. Chapter 1. Visions of Doom. Farseer Elythrai stood motionless at the edge of the infinity circuit, her ancient eyes fixed upon the swirling energies that housed the souls of Ulthwé's dead. For 3,000 years, she had served as guardian and guide to her craftworld, navigating the treacherous currents of fate to preserve what remained of their dying race. Now, as the ghostly whispers of her ancestors surrounded her, she felt the weight of that responsibility more keenly than ever before. The dome of the seer chamber arched high above, its wraithbone surface etched with runes that pulsed gently with psychic light. Around her, the younger seers of the Craftworld Council waited in respectful silence, their spirit stones glowing against their midnight black robes. They had been summoned without explanation, an unprecedented act from one normally so formal and methodical in her leadership. "I have walked the skein of fate," Elythrai finally spoke, her melodic voice carrying easily in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. "I have followed every thread, examined every possibility." She turned to face them, her lined face a mask of controlled anguish. "Ulthwé stands on the precipice of extinction." Murmurs rippled through the gathered seers, a rare display of emotion from those trained since birth to control their feelings. "What threat approaches, honored one?" asked Morai-Heg, the youngest of the council, and named for the crone goddess of fate, a presumptuous name that had proven apt as her talents had blossomed. Elythrai's gaze settled on her protégé. "Not one threat, but a convergence. The great devourer extends its shadow over the veiled region. Imperial forces mass at the Korava gate in response. And beneath it all," she hesitated, her slender fingers tightening around her witch staff. "Beneath it all, I sense the laughter of she who thirsts. The mention of Slaanesh, the chaos deity born from the Eldar's own excesses millennia ago, the great enemy that hunted their souls even now, sent a visible shudder through the assembly. Surely there must be a path," insisted Warlock Eyenor, his voice hardened by centuries of battle alongside Ulthwé's famed Black Guardians. "Some thread of fate that leads away from destruction." "There is one," Elythrai acknowledged. "Faint and treacherous, but it exists. I have seen an artifact of the ancient Eldari Empire, one of the Tears of Morai-Heg, thought lost during the fall. It resides in a forgotten temple on a world now claimed by the Imperium of Man." She gestured toward the center of the chamber, where a hololithic projection shimmered into existence. It displayed a blue-green world, largely covered in oceans with two main landmasses dominating the northern hemisphere. "Tyr'esya," she named it. "Once a maiden world of our people, now designated Imperial Colony Ax 119. The humans call it New Hydrafer." Eyenor studied the projection with narrowed eyes. "The artifact's power could shield us from the hive mind's shadow." "More than that," Elythrai replied. "The tier contains the crystallized foresight of an entire seer council from before the fall. Their combined visions, preserved at the moment of their ritual suicide when they glimpsed the coming catastrophe. With it, we could navigate not just this convergence of threats, but many to come. If such an artifact exists, why has it remained lost for so long?" questioned Morai-Heg, her skepticism both expected and appropriate. Young seers who accepted visions without question rarely survived their first century. Elythrai's expression darkened. "Because it was hidden deliberately. The knowledge it contains is dangerous, potentially corrupting to those unprepared for its burden." She straightened, suddenly looking every one of her 3,000 years. "I will recover it myself." The pronouncement sent another shock wave through the assembled seers. For the most senior Farseer to leave the Craftworld on a retrieval mission was unprecedented. Such tasks were typically assigned to rangers or aspect warriors, guided from afar by seer council visions. "Honored one," Eyenor objected immediately, "the risk is too great. Your guidance is essential to Ulthwé's survival. Send others in your place. I cannot, Elythrai said with finality. The vision is clear on this matter. Only one who has witnessed the full tapestry of possible futures can safely handle the tear. Anyone else who touches it will be driven mad by the unfiltered knowledge it contains. The council fell silent, absorbing the implications. Finally, Morai-Heg stepped forward. "Then I will accompany you," she stated, not as a request but as a declaration. "As your apprentice, it is my right and my duty." Elythrai studied her protégé for a long moment. Morai-Heg was talented beyond her years, perhaps the most gifted seer born to Ulthwé in generations. Her impulsiveness was troubling, but her potential was undeniable. "The path I walk is fraught with peril," Elythrai warned. "Not all who begin this journey will see its conclusion. All paths lead to death eventually," Morai-Heg replied with the casual fatalism of youth. "The only relevant question is whether that death serves our people." A ghost of a smile touched Elethrai's lips. "Very well, you will accompany me." She turned her attention back to the council. "We will require a small escort, no more than can be transported by a single ghost ship. Too large a force will draw unwanted attention from the imperial authorities." Eonar nodded reluctantly. "I will select warriors from the aspect shrines, those with experience in covert operations on human worlds. Include a ranger with knowledge of Tyr'esya," Elythrai instructed. "Preferably one who has observed the colony recently." Ranger Elythrai, returned from the Veiled region just 3 cycles ago, offered one of the other council members. She spent several human years moving among the colonies there. "Summon her," Elythrai commanded. "We depart within 10 cycles." As the council dispersed to make preparations, Morai-Heg lingered behind. When they were alone, she approached her mentor with unusual hesitation. "There is something you have not shared with the council," she observed quietly. "Something about this mission that troubles you deeply." Elythrai regarded her apprentice with a mixture of pride and concern. The young seer's intuition was remarkable, a gift that would serve her well if she survived long enough to fully master it. "Walk with me," the Farseer instructed, leading the way out of the chamber and onto one of the arched bridges that spanned the central atrium of the Seer Council's domain. Below them, wraithbone trees grew in elegant spirals, their crystalline leaves chiming softly in the artificial breeze. "What I am about to tell you must not reach the others," Elythrai said, after ensuring they were truly alone. "It would only create panic and uncertainty, where we need resolve." Morai-Heg inclined her head solemnly. "I understand, honored one. In my vision, I saw the Tear of Morai-Heg clearly. I saw the temple where it rests. I saw the path we must take to reach it." Elethrai's ancient eyes fixed on her apprentice. "But every thread of fate in which we retrieve the artifact leads to the same outcome, my death." The young seer's composure faltered for the first time. "That cannot be. There must be some alternative." "I have examined every possibility," Elythrai interrupted gently. "The artifact demands a sacrifice, a life freely given. That is why I must go personally, and why I must ask something of you that no master should ever ask of an apprentice." Understanding dawned in Morai-Heg's eyes. "You wish me to continue without you, to return the tear to Ulthwé." "More than that," Elythrai corrected. "I need you to succeed me. The council will resist. They believe you too young, too impulsive, but you have a gift, child. You see patterns in the skein that others miss, even those centuries your senior." Morai-Heg stepped back, visibly shaken. "I am not ready for such a burden." "None of us ever are," Elythrai said with unexpected compassion. "I certainly was not when the mantle fell to me after the Bandu incursion claimed my predecessor." She placed a slender hand on her apprentice's shoulder. "But readiness is a luxury our dying race can seldom afford." The young seer stood silent for a long moment, processing this unwelcome revelation. Finally, she straightened, composing herself with visible effort. "If this is the path fate has chosen," she said formally, "then I will walk it with dignity, honored one. I will not fail you or our people." Elythrai nodded, a complex mixture of emotions crossing her ancient features: pride, sorrow, and perhaps a touch of relief that her burdens would soon be set aside. "There is one more matter," she added. "The Rangers report unusual psychic activity in the human settlement closest to the temple. One of their kind may have developed latent abilities, perhaps even detected the artifact's presence." A human psyker, Morai-Heg frowned. "That complicates matters. Their Inquisition monitors such individuals closely." "Indeed, but it may also present an opportunity. The Imperium's blindness to the true nature of the warp makes even their trained psychers vulnerable to subtle guidance." Elethrai's expression turned contemplative. "This human may be useful to us, willing or not." "A dangerous gambit," her apprentice observed. "Human psychers are notoriously unstable, their minds poorly equipped for warp energies." "All gambits are dangerous when extinction looms," Elythrai replied simply. "We will evaluate this human when we arrive, and determine their usefulness then." As they turned to leave the bridge, a deep, resonant tone echoed throughout the Craftworld, the harmonic signature of a vessel returning from the webway. Moments later, their spirit stones vibrated with a Craftworld-wide sending from the autarchs who commanded Ulthwé's military forces. Corsair vessel returning from the Veiled region. Reports confirm Hive fleet splinter approaching the Korava system. Estimated time to intercept with Ulthwé's projected course: 60 cycles. The two seers exchanged glances. Their timeline had just contracted dramatically. "We leave in 3 cycles," Elythrai decided. "Have your affairs in order by then." With that grim instruction, she departed, her midnight robes flowing behind her like a shadow given form. 3 cycles later, Ranger Elythrai waited in the ghost ship's embarkation chamber, her lithe form nearly motionless as she observed the preparations around her. Unlike the formal midnight garb of the Craftworld's inhabitants, she wore the practical, weather-beaten equipment of one who lived among the stars. A long rifle of elegant alien design was slung across her back, its wraithbone components softly pulsing with psychic energy. The chamber itself reflected the unique aesthetic of Eldar engineering, organic yet precise, every curve and angle serving both practical function and artistic harmony. Wraithbone walls curved overhead like the ribs of some great beast, glowing with a soft inner light that required no visible source. 6 aspect warriors completed the escort party, 2 howling banshees in their bone-white armor, their masks currently retracted to reveal feminine features of inhuman beauty. A single dire avenger, his blue armor adorned with the shrine markings of Ulthwé's most prestigious aspect temple. 2 dark reapers, their skull-helmeted armor making them appear as incarnations of the death god Kine himself. And a shadow specter, her translucent armor rendering her partially insubstantial, a ghost given limited physical form. Elythrai had worked with aspect warriors before, during her centuries of wandering the stars beyond Ulthwé. They were supremely effective in combat, their minds and bodies honed to perfect killing instruments through thousands of hours of practice. But their hyper-focused training made them somewhat limited in situations requiring adaptability, which, in her experience, was precisely what missions into human territory always demanded. "You've spent time on Tyr'esya recently?" The question came from the taller of the 2 banshees, who had approached silently while Elythrai was lost in thought. The ranger turned, studying the warrior with experienced eyes. Young by Eldar standards, perhaps only 400 or 500 years old, but her movements suggested extensive battlefield experience. The ceremonial scars on her exposed face and neck told a story of rituals completed and honors earned. 3 human years, Elythrai confirmed. I observed the primary colonial settlement and their mining operations in the northern continent. And their military presence, the Banshee inquired further, minimal. A PDF garrison of approximately 500, equipped with standard Imperial Guard weaponry. 2 orbital platforms with light defense capabilities. The world holds little strategic value to them, primarily agricultural with some mineral extraction. The Banshee nodded sharply. I am Nelthrain of the Shrine of Resolute Fury. My sister warrior is Yelena. We have both trained specifically for operations against human military forces. Elythrai acknowledged this with a slight inclination of her head. Your skills may be tested. The humans are individually weak, but their numbers can be problematic if they are roused to full alert. We will move like the wind between raindrops, Nelthrain replied confidently. They will never know we were there until we are gone. Before Elythrai could respond to this optimistic assessment, the chamber's main doors parted to admit Farseer Elythrai and her apprentice. The assembled warriors straightened reflexively in the presence of Ulthwé's most revered seer. The webway coordinates are set, Elythrai announced without preamble. We will emerge within the ruins of one of our ancient gates, approximately 20 human kilometers from the temple site. Ranger Elythrai will guide us from there. She surveyed the small force with ancient eyes that had witnessed millennia of warfare. This mission's success is vital to Ulthwé's survival. However, we must remain undetected by Imperial authorities if possible. There is already a hive fleet approaching our Craftworld. We cannot afford to draw human military assets to our position as well. The dire Avenger stepped forward, touching his heart in formal salute. Our shrines understand the parameters, honored Farseer. We are prepared to operate with maximum stealth. See that you do, Elythrai replied. Now to your positions. We enter the webway in 10 minutes. As the warriors dispersed to their assigned stations, Elythrai found herself approached by Morai-Heg, the Farseer's apprentice. You have concerns, Ranger, the young seer observed quietly. Elythrai raised an eyebrow at this direct approach. Is this an official inquiry, Seer Morai-Heg? Consider it professional curiosity. You have spent more time among humans than any of us. Your insights may prove valuable. The ranger studied the seer for a moment, noting the subtle signs of strain around her eyes, unusual in one so young and normally so composed. Very well, she conceded. My concern is simple. Humans may be technologically primitive and psychically undeveloped, but they are dangerous precisely because of their unpredictability. They react with violence to what they don't understand, and they understand very little. You believe they will detect our presence, Morai-Heg pressed. I believe that plans involving humans rarely proceed as anticipated, Elythrai clarified, especially when psychic elements are involved. The Farseer mentioned a human psyker near our objective. Such individuals are wild cards even by human standards. The young seer nodded thoughtfully. Your caution is noted, Ranger. It aligns with certain contingencies the Farseer has prepared for. Before Elythrai could inquire further about these mysterious contingencies, a resonant tone echoed through the chamber, signaling imminent departure. The conversation would have to continue later. As she moved toward her assigned station, Elythrai couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. In her centuries as a ranger, she had developed an intuition for troubled missions. This one practically radiated complexity and danger. The graceful ghost ship detached from its moorings, gliding silently into the yawning webway portal that had opened before it. Within moments, they were traveling through the ancient network of tunnels between real space and the warp, pathways created by the Old Ones and inherited by the Eldar before their great fall from grace. Through the ship's viewing portal, Elythrai watched the impossible geometries of the webway stream past. Somewhere ahead lay Tyr'esya, a world she had hoped never to see again, and whatever fate awaited them all there. Chapter 2. Human Entanglements. Governor-elect Cassandra Helfort's office overlooked the central plaza of New Avalon, the primary settlement of the colony, officially designated as Imperial World Acts 119. Through the armored glass windows, he could see farmers bringing their produce to the weekly market, PDF troopers patrolling in their crisp uniforms, and construction crews expanding the colony's administrative buildings. All perfectly ordinary activities for a developing imperial world. So why couldn't he shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong? "The Geological Survey reports, sir," announced his aide, Matron Seraphina, placing a data slate on his desk with practiced efficiency. "The tremors in the northern highlands continue, though the Mechanicus adepts insist they pose no threat to our mining operations." Helfort barely glanced at the report. "And my daughter, has she emerged from her chambers yet?" Seraphina's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Lady Cassandra remains indisposed, sir. The medici administered another sedative 3 hours ago. He reports the episodes are becoming more frequent." Helfort turned to stare out the window again, his weathered face betraying none of the anguish he felt. Cassandra had always been different, sensitive, perceptive in ways that unnerved even her tutors. But in the last 6 months, these qualities had transformed into something far more concerning. Nightmares that left her screaming about the Ancient Ones returning. Fainting spells followed by pronouncements that made no sense. Drawings of structures no human had ever built, at least not on this world. The medici called it stress-induced psychosis. The colony's priest had more ominously suggested demonic influence, though he'd been diplomatic enough not to use those exact words to the governor-elect's face. Helfort knew better. He'd served in the Imperial Guard for 20 years before accepting this colonial appointment. He'd seen what happened to untrained psychers when their abilities manifested. The trembling hands, the nosebleeds, the glimpses of things that weren't there, or worse, things that were, but that human minds weren't meant to perceive. "Sir," Seraphina ventured carefully, "the delegation from the Administratum arrives in 3 days. If Lady Cassandra's condition doesn't improve, perhaps it would be best to—" "To what?" Helfort interrupted, his tone sharper than intended. "Hide her away, pretend my only child doesn't exist. Or perhaps you're suggesting I report her to the black ships." The matron's face paled. "Of course not, sir, I merely thought." A sharp knock interrupted them. Without waiting for permission, Captain Lauren of the PDF burst into the office, his uniform dusty and his expression grave. "Sir, we've detected an unauthorized landing in the northern ruins," he reported, coming to attention. "Auspex readings suggest a vessel of unknown configuration, definitely not Imperial." Helfort's fatigue vanished instantly, replaced by the alert focus of a veteran officer. "Xenos." "Unknown, sir. The readings were brief and partially obscured by the mineral deposits in that region. Whatever it was, it's employing some form of stealth technology. Our orbital platforms didn't detect any approach." "The northern ruins," Helfort mused, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "Near the restricted zone." "Yes, sir. Approximately 20 kilometers from the site Lady Cassandra has been speaking about." The 3 of them exchanged loaded glances. None of them wanted to voice the obvious connection. "Assemble a reconnaissance team," Helfort ordered after a moment. 20 of your best. Full combat loadout, but this is observation only, understood? No engagement without direct authorization from me." "Yes, sir," Lawrence saluted crisply. "And if we encounter confirmed Xeno's presence." "Standard protocol. Maintain surveillance, gather intelligence, and alert me immediately. Helfort's expression hardened. But Laurent, if it's the ruinous powers. Scorched earth, the captain finished grimly. I understand, sir. After Laurent departed, Helfort turned back to Seraphina. Have the Medici prepare my daughter for transport to the secure facility beneath the administrative complex. If we are dealing with a Xenos incursion, I want her protected. Yes, Governor, the matron replied formally, already moving toward the communication console. Alone, Helfort moved to a painting on the far wall, a serene landscape depicting the highlands to the north. Behind it was a small safe, which he opened with a practice sequence. From within, he removed a bolt pistol that had seen better days, its casing worn from decades of use, but its mechanism perfectly maintained. Too much of a coincidence, he muttered to himself as he checked the weapon. First the dreams, then the tremors, now this. Whatever was happening, he couldn't escape the feeling that his daughter somehow stood at the center of it all. The ancient webway gate on Tyr'esya had not been used in over 15,000 years. Once it had been housed in a graceful wraithbone structure that harmonized with the planet's natural beauty. Now, only crumbling ruins remained, half buried beneath centuries of soil and vegetation. The Eldar expedition emerged from the webway into darkness, their ghost ship materializing within the remnants of the gate chamber. Wraithbone sconces illuminated automatically at their arrival, responding to the psychic presence of their creator's descendants. The gate structure is more intact than expected, observed Morai-Heg as they disembarked. The humans have not discovered this place. They lack the psychic sensitivity to detect inactive wraithbone, Farseer Elythrai replied. To their crude instruments, these ruins register as natural formations. Unusual perhaps, but not artificial. Ranger Elythrai moved ahead of the group, her enhanced senses scanning their surroundings. The gate may be undiscovered, but there has been human activity nearby. Recent excavations, approximately 2 kilometers northeast. Elythrai nodded, unsurprised. The psyker we detected. Their awakening abilities likely drew them to places where the veil between real space and the webway is thin. The aspect warriors deployed in practiced formation, securing the perimeter, while the seers consulted a hololithic map projected from a device on Elythrai's belt. It displayed the surrounding terrain in perfect detail, highlighting a structure deep within the northern highlands. The temple lies there, the Farseer indicated, built during the apex of our empire's expansion before the fall. It was a pilgrimage site for those seeking communion with Morai-Heg, a shrine to the crone goddess, Nelthrain, the howling banshee, observed with interest. My shrine's teachings speak of such places, where the boundaries between the material and the immaterial were deliberately thinned to allow clearer communion with the divine. Indeed, Elythrai confirmed, the ancient Eldari understood such manipulations in ways now lost to us. The temple was designed to amplify psychic abilities, allowing even those with modest gifts to glimpse the skein of fate, which explains why it might call to an awakening human psyker, Morai-Heg concluded, even one with no understanding of what they were experiencing. Elythrai, who had been monitoring the surrounding wilderness through a sleek, alien-looking scope, rejoined the conversation. The human settlement has increased its security patrols since I was last here. Their primitive vehicles have been scanning this region periodically. They've detected our arrival, asked the dire Avenger, his hand moving to his shuriken catapult. Unlikely, the Ranger replied. Their technology is crude, but they've sensed something. Disturbances in the ruins, perhaps, or psychic echoes from the temple as it responds to the artifact within. Farseer Elythrai considered this information with the patient calculation of one who had navigated the currents of fate for millennia. We will proceed in 2 groups, she decided. Ranger Elythrai will guide myself and Morai-Heg to the temple by the most direct route. The aspect warriors will create a diversion near the human excavation sites, nothing destructive, merely enough to draw their attention away from our true objective. The Dark Reapers exchanged glances, their skull-helmeted faces impossible to read. And if we encounter human forces? One asked, his deep voice resonating within his armor. Avoid engagement if possible, Elythrai instructed firmly. If confrontation becomes unavoidable, non-lethal measures are preferred. These colonists are largely irrelevant to our purpose. Killing them unnecessarily would only draw greater imperial attention. The warriors acknowledged her orders with slight bows, though Nelthrain's posture suggested she found the restriction disappointing. Howling banshees were trained for direct combat, not subtle distractions. We move in precisely 1 hour, Elythrai concluded. Use this time to attune yourselves to the planet's psychic resonance. Tyr'esya was once a maiden world of our people. Its spirit remembers the Eldar, even if its surface has been claimed by humans. As the group dispersed to make preparations, Morai-Heg approached her mentor, pitching her voice too low for the others to hear. The skein feels distorted here, she observed, as if something is actively manipulating the threads of fate. Elythrai nodded slightly. The artifact's influence grows stronger as its awakening approaches. The Tear of Morai-Heg contains the crystallized foresight of an entire Seer Council, a nexus of potential futures so potent that it warps causality around itself. And the human psyche, how do they factor into this web? That, admitted Elythrai, remains unclear. I sense their presence, untrained but unusually strong for their species. They have been touched by the artifact's power, perhaps serving as a conduit for its awakening. Her ancient eyes narrowed slightly. We must locate this human. They may be integral to recovering the tear. Cassandra Helfort stood at the window of her private chambers, staring out at the distant highlands that had dominated her dreams for months. The Medicae's sedatives had worn off, leaving her mind clearer than it had been in weeks, though clarity was a mixed blessing when it meant the visions returned with greater intensity. She was 22 standard Terran years old, with the athletic build and practical mindset of someone raised on a frontier world. Until 6 months ago, she had been assisting her father with the colony's agricultural development program, applying her xenobiology education from the Administratum Academy on Damascus Prime. She had been rational, focused, with plans to eventually seek a position with the Departamento Agriculti. Then the dreams had started. Dreams of impossibly beautiful beings walking graceful buildings that twisted in ways human architecture never could. Dreams of crystalline structures that sang with voices no human throat could produce. And always, calling to her from the highlands, the temple. She had never seen it physically, yet she could describe every detail. The spiraling approach path, the statues of female figures holding crescent moons, the central chamber where a small pedestal held a teardrop-shaped crystal that pulsed with inner light, a crystal that whispered to her, across miles and millennia, in a language she somehow understood despite never having heard it before. The Ancient Ones return. The Fate Weavers come for what is theirs. You must be ready, Bridgewalker. The sound of her chamber door opening pulled her from these thoughts. She turned to see her father's aide, Matron Seraphina, enter with 2 Medicae assistants. Lady Cassandra, the matron greeted her with formal politeness. Your father has requested you be moved to the secure facility temporarily. These gentlemen will escort you. Cassandra noted the sedative injector. One of the assistants carried poorly concealed in his hand. Another episode, she asked with forced lightness, or has something happened? Seraphina's expression remained professionally neutral. Security concerns, my lady, merely precautionary. The Northern Highlands, Cassandra stated rather than asked. Someone has come for it, haven't they? The matron's composure faltered slightly. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Now, if you would please come with us. They're not human, Cassandra continued, her voice taking on a distant quality as another wave of images washed through her mind. Tall, graceful, ancient beyond human reckoning. They seek what was theirs long before mankind reached for the stars. The Medici assistants exchanged concerned glances, one subtly preparing the sedative injector. Cassandra noticed but made no move to resist or flee. What would be the point? The visions were growing stronger, more insistent. Fighting them had only made things worse. I'll come quietly, she assured them, gathering a small bag she had already prepared, as if some part of her had known this moment was approaching. But you should tell my father that fighting them would be a mistake. They haven't come to conquer or destroy. And how could you possibly know that, my lady? Serafina asked, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine concern. Cassandra smiled sadly as she allowed the Medici to take her arms. Because I've seen it. Thousands of futures branching and interweaving. In some there is bloodshed and horror, in others understanding and salvation. She looked back toward the window, toward the highlands. The difference hinges on choices not yet made, by them, by us, and by me. As they escorted her from the room, another vision flashed behind her eyes, clearer than any before. A female figure in elaborate robes, her face lined with millennia of wisdom and sorrow, standing before the crystal pedestal in the temple, reaching out with slender fingers toward the pulsing teardrop. And then, looking directly at Cassandra across time and space, speaking a single word in that musical alien language. Come. The expedition moved through the forests of Tyr'esya, with the silent grace that characterized their species. Even the heavily armored Dark Reapers seemed to float across the terrain, leaving barely a trace of their passage. For Eldar, this wasn't merely training but instinct. The natural movement patterns of a race evolved to exist in harmony with their environment rather than dominate it. As planned, they had separated into two groups. The aspect warriors headed toward the human excavation sites to create their diversion, while Elythrai, Morai-Heg, and Elythrai proceeded directly toward the temple. The human presence grows stronger ahead, Elythrai warned as they approached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. Their crude machines have been through this area recently. The ranger gestured toward tracks in the soft ground, the distinctive pattern of Imperial Chimera transport vehicles, likely belonging to the PDF forces they had observed from orbit. They search for something, observed Morai-Heg, or someone. Elythrai paused, her ancient eyes unfocusing slightly as she cast her psychic senses forward. The human psyker, she confirmed after a moment. Their authority figures have taken notice of the individual's abilities. They seek to contain what they do not understand, as is their way. Primitive, Morai-Heg commented. Even after millennia of possessing psychic potential, they still fear it rather than develop proper training structures. Their fear is not entirely irrational, Elythrai corrected her apprentice. Without the discipline and techniques our race has refined over millions of years, raw psychic power is dangerous to the wielder and all around them. The humans lack the lifespan needed to develop true mastery, and their souls burn too brightly, too chaotically. Elythrai, who had moved ahead to scout the terrain, returned with surprising urgency. We have a complication, she reported. Human forces are establishing a perimeter around the temple approach, at least 15 soldiers with standard Imperial weaponry. They're setting up auspex arrays and communication relays. Elythrai frowned. This development had not appeared in her readings of the skein, which suggested active interference with the currents of fate, likely from the artifact itself as it responded to their proximity. Can we bypass them? Asked Morai-Heg. Yes, the ranger confirmed. but it will add approximately 4 hours to our journey. We would need to circle around through the cave systems to the west. Elythrai considered their options. 4 hours might not seem significant against the backdrop of their species' long lifespans, but with a Tyrannid fleet approaching Ulthwé, every hour mattered. Additionally, the longer they remained on this world, the greater the chance of discovery by Imperial authorities who would respond with far more dangerous forces than colony PDF troopers. The diversion our warriors create should draw some of these forces away, she mused. But we must assume the temple itself will remain guarded. There is another option, Ilariq suggested hesitantly, the human psyker. If we could locate and secure this individual, they might provide both a distraction and potentially assistance in navigating whatever psychic defenses the temple may retain. Morai-Heg looked skeptical, assuming a human could comprehend such defenses, much less assist in overcoming them. This particular human has been drawn to the temple for months, according to our preliminary observations, the ranger countered. The artifact has established some form of connection with them. That suggests unusual capabilities, at least by their species' limited standards. Elythrai remained silent for a long moment, her consciousness extending once more into the currents of fate, seeking clarity. What she found was unusual, a nexus of possibility centered not on the temple as expected, but on a moving point several kilometers away. The human psyker, being transported from one location to another. The decision is made for us, she announced. The human psyker is indeed integral to our mission. Their path intersects with ours approximately 2 kilometers southeast of our position. We will intercept and evaluate their potential usefulness. Ilariq nodded, accepting the Farseer's judgment without question. Morai-Heg looked less convinced but raised no further objections. They altered course, moving swiftly through the deepening shadows as Tyr'esya's sun began to set. The forest grew denser here, with vegetation that had evolved over millennia since the planet's initial seeding by ancient Eldar bioengineers. Despite the human colonization, much of the world's ecosystem still bore the subtle hallmarks of Eldari design, plants that grew in mathematically perfect patterns, symbiotic relationships of impossible elegance, colors that complemented each other with artistic precision. After approximately 40 minutes of silent travel, Ilariq raised a hand for them to halt. Ahead, the distinctive rumble of human vehicles disturbed the forest's tranquility. Imperial Chimera, the ranger identified. 2 vehicles moving slowly, escort formation. They concealed themselves among the massive roots of a towering tree, another legacy of ancient Eldar bioengineering, though the humans would never recognize it as such. From this vantage point, they could observe the narrow road that had been crudely carved through the forest. The vehicles appeared moments later, boxy, inelegant machines that crushed vegetation beneath their treads with characteristic human disregard for natural harmony. Through enhanced vision, Elythrai could see armed guards within and atop the transports, their weapons at ready positions. The psyker is in the lead vehicle, she stated with certainty. I can sense their presence, untrained but potent. The artifact's influence has accelerated their awakening. How do we proceed? Asked Morai-Heg. A direct confrontation would alert the entire colony to our presence. Before Elythrai could respond, fate intervened in a most unexpected manner. The sound of shuriken catapults, distinctive Eldar weapons, echoed from somewhere to the north, followed by human shouting and the deeper boom of Imperial lasguns returning fire. The diversion, Ilariq realized, earlier than planned. The effect on the convoy was immediate. The vehicles halted, and urgent Vox communications could be heard as the guards tried to assess the situation. After a brief consultation, the rear chimera turned around, accelerating back the way it had come, presumably to reinforce whatever position was under attack. The lead vehicle remained in place, its commander unwilling to leave his primary charge unprotected but equally unwilling to proceed into potentially dangerous territory. "A perfect opportunity," Elythrai observed. "But we must act quickly before they receive new orders." With graceful efficiency, she removed a small device from within her robes, a delicate construction of wraithbone and crystal that fit in the palm of her hand. With a thought, she activated it, sending a pulse of psychic energy into the surrounding forest. The vegetation responded instantly. Vines and roots that had seemed dormant suddenly animated, whipping upward to ensnare the tracks of the Imperial vehicle. Tree branches bent and twisted, creating a canopy that cut off visibility for the human gunners. Confusion erupted among the soldiers. Some fired randomly into the forest, their lasbolts harmlessly striking ancient trees whose cellular structures had been engineered millennia ago to absorb energy weapons. Others attempted to cut the suddenly animated plant life with survival tools, making little progress against the supernaturally resilient vegetation. "Now," Elythrai commanded. The three Eldar moved with preternatural speed, closing the distance to the vehicle in seconds. Elythrai fired a single shot from her long rifle, precisely disabling the Chimera's communication array. Morai-Heg unleashed a focused wave of psychic energy that rendered 4 of the external guards unconscious without harming them. Elythrai simply walked through the chaos untouched, plants parting before her as she approached the vehicle's rear hatch. With a gesture, she caused the locking mechanism to disengage. The hatch swung open to reveal a startled Medici attendant reaching for a Laspasol, and beyond him, a human female sitting calmly on a bench seat, as if she had been expecting precisely this interruption. "Hello," the human said in Gothic, her eyes focusing on Elythrai with disconcerting directness. "I've been waiting for you to find me." The Farseer regarded the human with mild surprise, the first such emotion she had displayed in centuries. Behind her mask of serene control, she had not anticipated such awareness from a primitive human psyker. "You know why we are here," Elythrai stated rather than asked, her own Gothic perfect despite its infrequent use. The human female, young by their standards, barely more than a child, nodded. "The temple, the Tear, the choice that must be made." Her eyes unfocused briefly, as if seeing something beyond physical reality. "Your death approaches, Farseer. You've foreseen it, as have I." Beside her, Elythrai sensed Morai-Heg's shock at this pronouncement. The Medici attendant used this distraction to raise his Laspistol, but Elythrai disabled him with a precise blow before he could fire. "Cassandra Helfort," the human continued, naming herself, "daughter of Governor-elect Cassius Helfort, and apparently bridge walker between your kind and mine." She stood, surprisingly steady despite the sedatives evidently in her system. "We should go. My father's forces will respond to the disruption of communications within approximately 12 minutes. Elythrai studied the human carefully, her ancient mind reassessing possibilities. This Cassandra was far more attuned to the artifact's influence than anticipated, potentially useful, but also potentially dangerous if not properly guided. "You will accompany us to the temple," the Farseer decided. "Whether you serve as bridge or barrier remains to be seen." Cassandra smiled faintly at this. "Exactly what the crystal showed me you would say." She stepped forward, seemingly unafraid of the alien beings who had just dispatched her guards. "The future fragments into countless possibilities from this point forward. I've seen you triumphant. I've seen you broken. I've seen my world burned and saved. The difference lies in what happens when we reach the Tear of Morai-Heg." "The human knows too much," Morai-Heg whispered in their own language. "This level of foreknowledge is unprecedented in their species." Not for knowledge, Elythrai corrected, studying Cassandra with growing interest. The artifact has formed a connection with her mind, showing her fragments of potential futures just as it shows us. A crude mirror of our own farsight, but effective nonetheless. She switched back to Gothic. Come, human, your insight may indeed prove valuable, but time grows short. As they melted back into the forest, leaving the disabled vehicle and unconscious guards behind, Cassandra Helfort cast one final glance toward the colony she had called home. In her mind's eye, she could see her father receiving reports of the attack, mobilizing forces, his face tight with worry for her safety. She could see the ripples of consequence spreading outward from this moment, the Imperium's eventual notice, the investigations that would follow. But most clearly, she could see the temple waiting, its ancient structure pulsing with renewed energy after millennia of dormancy. Within it, the Tear of Morai-Heg called to all of them, Eldar and human alike, promising revelation and destruction in equal measure. The Ancient Ones have returned, whispered the crystal voice in her mind. And you, Bridgewalker, will determine whether their return heralds salvation or doom. The last Seer of Tyr'esya. Chapter 3. Convergence of Fates. Captain Laurent crouched behind the twisted wreckage of what had once been an Imperial chimera, his last pistol held ready as he surveyed the battlefield. 3 of his men lay dead, their bodies bearing the distinctive wounds of Xeno's weaponry, clean, precise cuts that had severed arteries or pierced vital organs with surgical accuracy. 5 more were wounded, being tended by the squad's medic in the meager shelter of a rocky outcropping. "Status report," he voxed to his second-in-command, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing dread in his gut. "Perimeter compromised on the eastern approach, sir," came the tense reply. "We've confirmed at least 4 distinct Xenos combatants, possibly more. They're using some kind of advanced stealth technology. Our auspex can barely track them." Laurent had served the Imperium for 15 years, including a 2-year deployment to the Damocles Gulf during the early Tau incursions. He'd faced Xenos before, but there was something about these particular aliens that chilled him to the core. The fluid grace of their movements, the devastating precision of their attacks, and most unnervingly, their discipline. They weren't trying to slaughter his men, despite clearly possessing the capability. They were controlling the battlefield, herding his forces away from certain areas while drawing them toward others. "They're Eldar," he realized aloud, recalling briefings from his Schola Progenium training. "Emperor, protect us." The distinctive sound of shuriken fire rattled from somewhere to his right, followed by cries of pain from more of his men. He risked a glance around the edge of the chimera and caught a glimpse of a tall, impossibly graceful figure in bone-white armor, wielding what appeared to be a power sword but far more elegant than any Imperial design. The alien warrior moved like water-given form, dispatching 2 of his troopers before they could even raise their weapons. Laurent ducked back, his mind racing. Eldar, ancient, technologically advanced, and inscrutably alien in their motivations. What could possibly draw them to a backwater colony like New Hydrafor? The answer hit him with sudden clarity. The ruins, the tremors, the governor's daughter and her unexplained psychic episodes. "All units fall back to secondary positions," he ordered through the vox. "Maintain defensive formation, but do not, repeat, do not pursue the Xenos if they withdraw." He needed to contact the governor immediately. If there were Eldar on New Hydrafor, and they were interested in the ruins his daughter had been obsessively drawing, the situation was far beyond a simple security matter. This was a planetary-level threat that required immediate escalation to Imperial authorities. As if reading his thoughts, the Xenos' attack suddenly ceased. The forest fell silent, the only sounds the moans of wounded men and the crackle of burning equipment. Laurent waited, tense and ready, for several minutes, but no further attack came. "Sir," his second-in-command voxed, confusion evident in his voice. "There, gone, just withdrew completely." "Maintain vigilance," Laurent ordered. "This isn't over." He activated his long-range communicator, preparing to make the most difficult call of his career. "Connect me to Governor Helfort, Priority Alpha." The communicator crackled for a moment before establishing connection. "Laurent, what's the situation? Did you find my daughter?" The captain closed his eyes briefly, dreading the news he had to deliver. "Sir, we've encountered hostile Xenos forces. Eldar, sir. They've disabled the escort Chimera. Lady Cassandra's status is unknown." The silence that followed was deafening. "Sir," Laurent continued, "I believe they're headed toward the restricted ruins, the same ones Lady Cassandra has been fixated on." Another pause, then Helfort's voice returned, all personal anguish suppressed beneath the iron discipline of a former Imperial Guard officer. "Understood. Implement contingency, protocol Xenos incursion. I'm ordering a full PDF deployment and sending an astropathic distress call to the nearest Imperial Navy battle group." "Yes, sir," Laurent acknowledged, relieved that the governor was taking decisive action. "And Laurent," Helfort added, his voice dropping slightly, "if you find my daughter with the Xenos, determine if she's cooperating willingly." The implication was clear. Even the governor's daughter would not be exempt from the Imperium's stance on Xenos collaboration. "Understood, sir," Laurent replied grimly. As he closed the communication channel, the captain couldn't help but wonder what strange confluence of events had brought Eldar to their remote world, and what terrible price they would all pay for this unwanted attention. Through the dense forest of Tyr'esya, the small group moved with purpose. 2 Eldar seers, a ranger, and a human psyker forming an alliance unprecedented in Imperial space. They traveled in silence for the most part, the Eldar naturally reticent and the human, Cassandra, focused on navigating terrain far more rugged than she was accustomed to. "Your physical conditioning is inadequate," observed Morai-Heg when they paused briefly at a small stream. It wasn't meant as an insult, merely a statement of fact delivered with the clinical detachment characteristic of her kind. Cassandra sipped water from cupped hands before responding. "My species prioritizes different attributes. We compensate for physical limitations with adaptability. An evolutionary strategy of dubious merit," the young seer remarked, "given humanity's constant state of warfare and instability." "Enough, Morai-Heg," Farseer Elythrai intervened softly. "The human's insights have already proven valuable. Her physical limitations are irrelevant to our purpose." Throughout their journey, Cassandra had indeed demonstrated an uncanny awareness of their surroundings, warning of Imperial patrols before even Elythrai could detect them, suggesting alternate routes that invariably proved more efficient. The artifact's influence on her mind was evident and growing stronger as they approached the temple. "We are being followed," Elythrai announced, returning from her position as rear guard. "Not Imperial forces. Something else." Elythrai extended her senses outward, probing the psychic currents of the forest. "Interesting," she murmured after a moment. "There is a presence, but it's elusive. Neither fully in real space nor the warp." "Necrons," suggested Morai-Heg, her hand moving instinctively to the witch blade at her hip. "No," Cassandra interjected, her eyes unfocused. "Something drawn by the awakening, a fragment of what was shattered long ago." The 3 Eldar stared at her, even Elythrai's millennia of composure slightly shaken by the human's cryptic pronouncement. "Explain," the Farseer commanded. "I see." Cassandra struggled to articulate concepts beyond her human vocabulary. Entities that once walked between stars but were broken when the great enemy was born. Scattered, diminished, but not destroyed. One has sensed the tears awakening, and comes to reclaim what it believes is its birthright. Elythrai and Morai-Heg exchanged significant glances. The human was describing something that matched ancient Eldari legends, beings from before even the Eldar's ascendancy, entities that had existed during the war in heaven. "An old one," Morai-Heg whispered, a note of awe entering her normally controlled voice. "No," Elythrai corrected, her ancient wisdom drawing connections between fragmentary myths and historical records. "What she describes is more likely an enslaver, a psychic predator from the earliest days of the galaxy. They were drawn to concentrations of psychic energy. Like the Tear of Morai-Heg," Elythrai concluded grimly. "And now to the human as well, as her abilities manifest more strongly." "Indeed," Elythrai turned to Cassandra, "your mind is broadcasting across multiple dimensions, human. Untrained psychers of your kind are like beacons in the warp. The sedatives your physicians administered were actually providing some protection by dampening your abilities. Now, fully awake, I'm a lighthouse in a storm," Cassandra finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Calling to things that hunger." "Precisely. We must accelerate our pace. The temple's ancient wards will provide some protection, but only if we reach them before the entity fully materializes in real space." They resumed their journey with new urgency, Elythrai scouting ahead, while Morai-Heg remained close to Cassandra, grudgingly lending the human physical support when the terrain proved challenging. The young seer's initial disdain had been tempered by pragmatic recognition of the human's importance to their mission. "You've foreseen it too, haven't you?" Cassandra asked quietly as they navigated a particularly steep incline. "The Farseer's death." Morai-Heg glanced sharply at her. "How could you possibly know that?" "The crystal shows me fragments of all your thoughts, pieces of possible futures." Cassandra paused to catch her breath. "In most of them she dies in the temple chamber. In some, you do as well." "And yourself?" Morai-Heg couldn't resist asking. "What futures await Cassandra Helfort?" The human's expression became distant. "Transformation, mainly. In few futures do I remain as I am now. In most I become something else, sometimes glorious, sometimes terrible." Her eyes refocused on the Eldar seer. "Your Farseer understands this. It's partially why she sought me out. I'm not just a guide, I'm a potential vessel." Before Morai-Heg could demand clarification of this disturbing statement, Elythrai's voice called from ahead. "We approach the outer temple boundaries." They crested a final ridge to behold their destination. The Temple of Morai-Heg had clearly been magnificent once, a soaring structure of wraithbone and crystal that caught the dying light of Tyr'esya's sun and transformed it into prismatic patterns across the valley. Now much of it lay in ruins, the elegant spires crumbled, the crystal chambers shattered. Yet even in decay, it retained an ethereal beauty that transcended its physical damage. The wraithbone still pulsed with dim light, responding to the presence of Eldar after millennia of abandonment. The remaining crystal elements hummed with subliminal harmonies that resonated in the mind rather than the ear. "Magnificent," breathed Morai-Heg, genuine emotion coloring her voice for the first time. "Even after 15,000 years. The temple recognizes its children," Elythrai observed softly. "It awakens to our presence." Cassandra stared at the structure with an expression approaching reverence. "It's exactly as I saw in my visions. The approach path with statues of the crone goddess, the spiraling entrance, the way the light plays through the crystal archways. Imperial troops have established positions around the main entrance," Elythrai reported, lowering her long-range viewing device. "Approximately 20 soldiers with standard equipment. No heavy weapons visible, but they've set up a perimeter of motion-sensitive auspex arrays." "Primitive technology easily circumvented," Morai-Heg dismissed. "Perhaps," the ranger acknowledged, but they've positioned themselves effectively. Approaching from any direction will trigger their alerts. Elythrai considered their options. The temple has secondary entrances, passages known only to the priestesses who once served here. They would have been concealed, designed to remain hidden even as the structure decayed. There, Cassandra pointed to a seemingly unremarkable section of rubble to the east of the main structure. Behind that fallen arch, a passage leads downward, then up into the temple's heart. Again, the Eldar exchanged glances at this display of unexpected knowledge. The artifact's connection to her mind grows stronger as we approach, Elythrai explained. It imparts knowledge that should be accessible only to our kind. Is that not concerning? Morai-Heg asked. A human with access to ancient Eldari secrets. Under normal circumstances, yes, the Farseer acknowledged. But her role in this convergence of fates was written long before her birth. The artifact has chosen her as much as it has chosen us. Chosen for what exactly? Elythrai inquired. Her practical ranger's mindset focused on immediate concerns rather than mystical implications. Before Elythrai could respond, a psychic shockwave rippled through the valley, powerful enough that even Cassandra sensed it, staggering slightly under its impact. "It comes," the Farseer announced grimly. "The entity has found a way to manifest more quickly than anticipated." In the fading light, a shimmering distortion appeared at the valley's edge, a tear in real space that writhed and pulsed with unnatural energies. Through it, something was emerging, a shape that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, parts of it visible to physical eyes while other aspects registered only as psychic impressions of hunger and ancient malice. "Enslaver," confirmed Elythrai, her witch blade drawn and glowing with crackling energies. "Morai-Heg, take the human to the temple entrance she identified. Elythrai and I will delay the entity." "Honored Farseer," Morai-Heg began to protest, but Elythrai cut her off with a gesture. "This is not the death I've foreseen, apprentice. Go. The artifact must be secured before the Imperial forces detect this disturbance and call for reinforcements." Reluctantly, Morai-Heg guided Cassandra toward the concealed entrance, moving swiftly across the open ground between their position and the temple ruins. Behind them, Elythrai and Elythrai stood firm as the enslaver fully materialized, a horror of tentacles and eyes surrounding a maw that existed partially in the warp itself. "A fragment indeed," the Farseer observed, her voice betraying no fear despite the ancient terror they faced. "Barely a shadow of what such entities once were, before the fall forced them back into the darkest regions of the warp." "Will your powers affect it?" Elythrai asked practically, her long rifle already trained on the approaching monstrosity. "Partially. Its nature places it beyond complete vulnerability to physical weapons, but between my witchblade and your wraithbone ammunition, we can slow its advance." The creature surged forward with unexpected speed, tentacles lashing out across impossible distances. Elythrai countered with a blast of psychic energy that momentarily disrupted the entity's form, while Elythri's precision shots severed tentacles that reformed almost immediately, but slightly smaller each time. "Its connection to real space is incomplete," Elythrai noted as they fell back gradually, maintaining distance from the enslaver while drawing it away from the temple. "It requires psychic energy to sustain its manifestation. Then we offer it a feast of neither flesh nor spirit," Elythrai replied with grim ranger humor, firing continuously as they executed their fighting retreat. Meanwhile, Morai-Heg and Cassandra had reached the concealed entrance, a narrow fissure in the wraithbone foundation that would have been invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. As Cassandra had described, it led downward into darkness before curving back up toward the temple's central chambers. "How can you see?" Cassandra asked as they navigated the unlit passage, her human eyes struggling with the absolute darkness. Wraithbone responds to Eldari presence, Morai-Heg explained tersely. It provides illumination sufficient for our needs. Indeed, the walls around them had begun to emit a soft, blue-white glow that gradually intensified as they progressed deeper. Ancient runes carved into the surface pulsed with renewed energy, responding to the presence of an Eldar seer after millennia of dormancy. These are psychic wards, Morai-Heg observed, studying the runes as they walked, designed to prevent unauthorized access to the inner sanctum. Will they stop us? Cassandra asked. They recognize me as Eldari, and you, the young seer frowned slightly. They seem to be accepting you as authorized. The artifact's influence, no doubt. The passage eventually opened into a circular chamber that must have once been breathtaking in its beauty. Though now cracked and dulled with age, the wraithbone walls were inlaid with intricate patterns of crystal and precious metals, forming mandalas of incredible complexity. The ceiling arched high above, designed to resemble the night sky of ancient Eldari, with constellations unfamiliar to human astronomy. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal of pure white wraithbone, untouched by the decay affecting the rest of the structure. Upon it rested a teardrop-shaped crystal approximately the size of a human fist, glowing with inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "The Tear of Morai-Heg," Morai-Heg whispered, uncharacteristic awe in her voice. Just as the legends described it. Cassandra stared at the crystal, mesmerized. "It's been calling to me, showing me fragments of what was and what might be. It contains the crystallized foresight of an entire seer council from before the fall," Morai-Heg explained, approaching the pedestal cautiously. Their combined visions, preserved at the moment they glimpsed the catastrophe that would consume our empire. They saw the birth of Slaanesh, Cassandra stated rather than asked. "The death of your gods, the shattering of your civilization." The Eldar seer looked sharply at her. "How do you know that name? No human should speak it." "The crystal has shown me," Cassandra replied simply. "The fall of the Eldari, the rise of the great devourer, the silent advance of the Necron dynasties, the slow decay of the human imperium." Her eyes remained fixed on the tear. So many futures, all converging on moments of choice like this one. Before Morai-Heg could respond, the chamber's entrance sealed suddenly, wraithbone flowing like liquid to close the passage they had used. From another doorway, previously invisible against the patterned wall, Farseer Elythrai entered, her robes torn and stained with ichor from the battle with the enslaver. "The entity is temporarily banished," she announced without preamble. "Elythrai has positioned herself to monitor the Imperial forces, who have detected the psychic disturbance and are advancing on the temple." Her ancient eyes fixed on the Tear of Morai-Heg, glowing on its pedestal. "So the prize reveals itself at last. We should take it and return to the ghost ship immediately," urged Morai-Heg. "The humans will bring reinforcements, and the enslaver will reconstitute itself given time." "It is not so simple," Elythrai replied, approaching the pedestal slowly. "The tear cannot be simply removed and transported. Its energies must be properly contained, or the resulting psychic backlash would destroy this entire valley, and ourselves with it." "The ritual of containment," Cassandra said suddenly, again displaying knowledge she should not possess. "It requires a sacrifice, a life freely given." "Yes," confirmed Elythrai, her gaze now fixed on the human. "A vessel that can contain the tear's power must be prepared through ritual sacrifice. In ancient times, this would have been a priestess of Morai-Heg, who spent decades in preparation for the honor." "And now?" asked Morai-Heg, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. "Now we must adapt the ritual to our circumstances." The Farseer turned to her apprentice. You must be the one to perform it, using the human as the focus. Morai-Heg's composure finally broke. Me. But I have not been trained in the ancient rites. And using a human as the vessel, it's unprecedented, potentially catastrophic. The human has been prepared by the artifact itself, Elythrai explained patiently. For months, it has been reshaping her mind, preparing her to receive its knowledge. She is no longer fully human, just as the Tear is no longer fully Eldari. Both have been transformed by their connection. And your role in this? Morai-Heg demanded, suddenly suspicious. The death you foresaw will come regardless of what choice we make here, the ancient Farseer completed for her. But the manner of it, and what it accomplishes, remains in flux. Cassandra stepped forward, her eyes now glowing faintly with the same inner light as the Tear. I understand now. The crystal hasn't just been showing me visions, it's been reshaping me, preparing me as a secondary vessel in case its primary home was threatened. She looked directly at Elythrai. And you knew this from the beginning. It's why you sought me out specifically, not just any human psyker. Yes, admitted the Farseer. In all my readings of the skein, you appeared as a nexus of possibility, a human mind unusually receptive to the artifact's influence. The convergence of your awakening abilities with our quest for the Tear was not coincidence, but design. Though whether by the artifact itself or some greater pattern in fate, even I cannot say. The chamber trembled suddenly, dust falling from the ancient ceiling. Outside, the sounds of battle had resumed, lasguns firing, orders being shouted in Gothic, and beneath it all, a psychic howl that could only be the enslaver returning to the hunt. We have no more time for debate, Elythrai declared. The ritual must begin now. Morai-Heg, I will guide you through the necessary steps. She turned to Cassandra. Human, you must decide. The transformation will forever change you. You will retain your identity, but your connection to your species will be altered. You will become a bridge between human and Eldari, the first of your kind to carry the burden of our foresight. And if I refuse, then the Tear remains here, its power eventually drawing more monstrosities from the warp, until this entire world is consumed. Your people will die, as will many of mine when Ulthwé falls to the approaching hive fleet, without the guidance the Tear could provide. Cassandra stood silent for a long moment, her mind racing through the fragments of futures the crystal had shown her. In most, there was pain and transformation. In some, there was death, hers, the Eldar's, her father's, millions of others across countless worlds. But in a precious few threads, there was something else. A path between destruction and salvation, narrow and treacherous but real. I accept, she said finally. Tell me what to do. Relief flickered briefly across Elythrai's ancient features, before her composure returned. Stand before the pedestal. Place your hands on either side of the Tear, but do not touch it directly. Morai-Heg will guide your mind while I perform the necessary rites. As Cassandra moved into position, the chamber shuddered again, more violently this time. The sounds of battle outside had intensified, and a new psychic pressure was building, the enslaver drawing closer, sensing the imminent activation of the power it sought. Begin, apprentice, Elythrai instructed Morai-Heg. Form the mental link with the human. Guide her consciousness toward the patterns I showed you in your training. Reluctantly but with growing determination, Morai-Heg positioned herself behind Cassandra, placing her slender hands on the human's temples. Her eyes closed in concentration as she extended her psychic awareness into the human's mind, and found herself unexpectedly drawn into a maelstrom of imagery and sensation. Cassandra's consciousness was no longer purely human. The artifact had indeed been reshaping her, creating pathways and structures that mirrored Eldar psychic architecture. Within this transformed mindscape, Morai-Heg could see the threads of fate spreading outward in patterns familiar from her seer training, but with an intuitive, emotional quality that was distinctly human. "Remarkable," she murmured. "Her mind adapts even as we begin. The artifact chose well." Meanwhile, Elythrai had begun the ritual proper, her voice rising and falling in the ancient language of Eldari mystics, words that had not been spoken aloud since before the fall. As she chanted, the wraithbone walls responded, the embedded crystals resonating in harmonic patterns that amplified her psychic projection. The Tear of Morai-Heg pulsed more rapidly now, its inner light brightening until it was almost painful to behold. Beneath Morai-Heg's guidance, Cassandra's consciousness reached toward the artifact, forming the preliminary bonds that would allow for the transfer of its energies. "The first stage is complete," announced Elythrai after several minutes of continuous chanting. "Now comes the sacrifice." "What must I give?" asked Cassandra, her voice distant as she remained partially entranced by her connection to the Tear. "Not you," Elythrai corrected gently. "The sacrifice is mine to make. It always has been." Before either Morai-Heg or Cassandra could react, the Farseer drew her witchblade and plunged it directly into her own heart. Golden ichor, the blood of the Eldar, spilled onto the chamber floor, flowing in impossible patterns that defied gravity to form complex runes around the pedestal. "Honored one," cried Morai-Heg in shock and horror. "Complete the ritual," Elythrai commanded, her voice steady despite the mortal wound. "My life energy will fuel the transference and stabilize the human vessel. Without it, the power would overwhelm her mind and destroy you both." The ancient Farseer sank gracefully to her knees, one hand still gripping the witchblade embedded in her chest, the other extended toward the Tear. "I have walked the skein of fate for 3,000 years, she said, her voice growing fainter. "In all that time, I have sought a path that would lead our people away from extinction. This sacrifice is but a small price for that possibility." As Elythrai's life force ebbed, the chamber filled with blinding light. The Tear of Morai-Heg rose from its pedestal, hovering between Cassandra's outstretched hands. Tendrils of energy connected it to the dying Farseer, to Morai-Heg, and most intensely to Cassandra herself. "The future fragments," Elythrai whispered, her ancient eyes fixed on something beyond physical sight. "Choose wisely, human who is becoming more. The fate of many worlds now rests in your transformed mind." With those final words, the Farseer of Ulthwé closed her eyes for the last time, as her spirit stone activated, capturing her soul at the moment of death to protect it from she who thirsts. The Tear of Morai-Heg shattered into countless crystalline fragments that swirled around Cassandra like a miniature galaxy. The fragments did not fall, but instead orbited the human for several seconds before suddenly accelerating, embedding themselves beneath her skin in a pattern that mirrored the constellations depicted on the chamber ceiling. Where they entered, they left behind luminescent markings like living tattoos that pulsed with the same rhythm as the original crystal. Cassandra screamed, not in pain but in overwhelming sensation, as the crystallized foresight of an ancient seer council poured into her transformed mind. 15,000 years of predictions, warnings, and visions flooded her consciousness, temporarily overwhelming her sense of self. Morai-Heg maintained the psychic link, guiding and stabilizing the process as best she could, though the raw power flowing through the connection threatened to overwhelm her own formidable mental defenses. She had been trained for many possibilities during her apprenticeship, but nothing had prepared her for this unprecedented merging of human psyche with Eldari foresight. The chamber shuddered a final time, more violently than before. The walls cracked, ancient crystals shattering as the temple itself responded to the release of long-contained energies. Outside, The enslaver howled in psychic fury as it sensed the power it sought being claimed by another. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the process was complete. The blinding light faded, the tremors ceased, and silence fell over the chamber. Cassandra Helfort stood transformed. The crystalline fragments had vanished beneath her skin, but their power radiated from her in waves that Morai-Heg could perceive clearly with her psychic senses. The human's eyes had changed, becoming larger and slightly almond-shaped, with irises that shifted color like the surface of the original tear. "It is done," Morai-Heg said quietly, removing her hands from Cassandra's temples and breaking the direct mental link between them. "The Tear of Morai-Heg has found a new vessel." Cassandra turned slowly, her movements now possessing a fluid grace reminiscent of the Eldar themselves. "Not just a vessel," she corrected, her voice layered with harmonic overtones that hadn't been present before. "A bridge, a nexus of converging fates." She knelt beside Elythrai's body, gently removing the spirit stone that now contained the ancient Farseer's soul. "She knew this would happen, saw it long before she sought me out. Her sacrifice was necessary for the transformation to succeed." "And now," asked Morai-Heg, still trying to process the death of her mentor and the unprecedented event she had just witnessed, "what does the foresight show you?" "Everything," Cassandra replied simply, "and nothing with certainty. The paths diverge from this point forward in ways too numerous to count." She rose, cradling the spirit stone carefully. "But one thing is clear. We must leave this place immediately. The enslaver still hunts, and my father's forces approach with weapons that could destroy us all." As if to confirm her warning, a massive explosion shook the temple, the distinctive sound of Imperial heavy weapons being deployed against the outer structure. "They're using basilisk artillery," Cassandra observed with preternatural calm, "attempting to breach the temple walls rather than risk sending troops inside after witnessing the enslaver." "Can you sense Elythrai?" Morai-Heg asked urgently. "We cannot leave her behind." Cassandra closed her newly transformed eyes briefly. "She lives, moving ahead of the Imperial advance. She will rendezvous with us at the western exit." "There is no western exit," Morai-Heg objected. "Only the passage we entered through, which has sealed itself." "There will be," Cassandra stated with quiet certainty. "The temple responds to me now, as it once responded to the priestesses of Morai-Heg. Follow." Without waiting for a response, she moved to a section of wall that appeared identical to the rest of the chamber. At her approach, the wraithbone flowed like water, creating an opening where none had existed before. Morai-Heg looked back at her mentor's body, hesitant to leave it behind. "Her physical form cannot be transported," Cassandra completed gently, "but her soul is preserved in the spirit stone. When we reach Ulthwé, she will join the infinity circuit as tradition demands." Another artillery shell struck the temple, closer this time. Dust and fragments of crystal rained down from the ceiling. "We must go," Cassandra insisted. "The futures in which we delay all end in destruction." Reluctantly, Morai-Heg followed the transformed human through the newly created passage, leaving behind the chamber where millennia of Eldar history had converged with the destiny of a single human psyker, and where the galaxy's future had been irrevocably altered as a result. Chapter 4: Pursuit. Governor-elect Cassandra Helfort stood in the makeshift command center, watching grainy picked feeds from the helmet cameras of his PDF troopers as they advanced on the alien temple. The structure was unlike anything he had seen in his years of Imperial service. Graceful curves and impossible angles that seemed to shift in the fading daylight, as if the building itself were somehow alive. "Magnify Sector 3, he ordered, pointing to a blur of movement on one of the screens. The tech adept complied, and the image zoomed in to reveal a tall, impossibly graceful figure in lightweight armor, moving with unnatural speed between cover positions. "Eldar confirmed, sir," Captain Lawrence's voice crackled over the Vox. "We've spotted at least 3 distinct individuals near the temple complex. Unknown how many might be inside." Helfort's jaw tightened, his worst fears confirmed. "And Cassandra, any sign of her?" A brief hesitation before Laurent responded. "Negative, sir. But sensors detected a significant energy spike from within the temple approximately 15 minutes ago. Readings are unusual. The tech priests can't identify the energy signature." "The basilisks are in position," interjected Colonel Drennan, the senior PDF officer. "With your authorization, we can begin bombardment. Soften the structure before sending in the infantry." Helfort hesitated, his parental instincts warring with his duty as an imperial governor. If Cassandra was inside that temple, but if she was with the Xenos, possibly cooperating with them. "Sir," Laurent added, his voice lowered slightly, "the Xenos aren't the only threat. My squad encountered something else. Something that doesn't show up clearly on our auspex, but killed 3 of my men without leaving physical wounds. The men are calling it a warp entity." A chill ran down Helfort's spine. Xenos were bad enough, but demons or warp-spawned horrors were beyond the capabilities of a colonial PDF to handle. This situation was escalating beyond anything he had prepared for. "Begin bombardment," he ordered finally. "Targeted strikes on the outer structure only. I want that temple sealed, nothing in or out until reinforcements arrive." He turned to his communications officer. "Has the astropathic distress call been sent?" "Yes, sir. Full priority, with Xenos and possible warp incursion designations. Nearest Imperial Navy battle group estimates arrival in system within 7 to 10 days, depending on warp conditions." 7 to 10 days. An eternity when dealing with such threats. But the decisions had been made, the wheels set in motion. Now they could only proceed according to protocol and pray to the Emperor for guidance. "Colonel Drennan, you have operational command of the containment action," Helfort stated formally. "Captain Laurent will coordinate reconnaissance. I want constant surveillance of that temple, and any Xenos attempting to escape are to be engaged and neutralized." As his officers moved to implement his orders, Helfort remained fixed on the pict feed showing the alien temple. The first basilisk shells were already arcing toward it, trailing smoke against the darkening sky. "What have they done to you, Cassandra?" he whispered to himself. "And what have you become?" The newly formed passage twisted through the temple's interior, leading Cassandra and Morai-Heg away from the bombarded eastern section. The wraithbone walls around them trembled with each impact, dust and crystal fragments raining down from the ceiling. But the ancient structure's integrity held, for now. "The temple responds to your commands," Morai-Heg observed as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors. "Such control should be impossible for a human, even one touched by our artifacts." "I am no longer merely human," Cassandra replied, her transformed eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "The tear's fragments have altered my physical form and rewired my neural pathways to accommodate the influx of foresight. I exist in between states now." Another shell struck nearby, this one close enough to crack the wall beside them. The wraithbone sealed itself immediately, flowing like liquid before hardening again. "The humans are becoming more accurate with their targeting," Morai-Heg noted grimly. "They must have spotters coordinating the artillery." "My father," Cassandra confirmed, a hint of sadness coloring her voice. "He believes he's containing a Xenos incursion and possible warp breach. His actions follow Imperial protocol precisely." "Your father commands these forces," the Eldar seer's tone sharpened with concern. "That complicates matters." "It changes nothing," Cassandra stated, her new awareness allowing her to perceive the branching threads of possibility with startling clarity. In all potential futures where we attempt to communicate or negotiate, the outcome is the same. Imperial reinforcements arrive, and everything within this valley is purged. The Imperium cannot tolerate what it does not understand. They reached a junction where three identical passages converged. Without hesitation, Cassandra chose the leftmost path, which began to slope gently upward. "How can you navigate with such certainty?" Morai-Heg asked. "Even our most accomplished Farseers rely on psychic mapping when exploring unknown structures. The temple's layout is encoded within the tier's knowledge," Cassandra explained. "I can see its original design overlaid upon its current state. This passage will lead us to a ceremonial balcony on the western face, our best route to rendezvous with Elythrai, and avoid both the Imperial forces and the enslaver." "And what of our warriors? The Aspect Shrine members who provided our diversion?" Cassandra's expression became distant as she accessed the foresight granted by the tier. "Four survive, already returning to the webway gate through the forest. The dire Avenger fell to Imperial fire approximately 12 minutes ago. His spirit stone is intact but in Imperial hands." Morai-Heg absorbed this news with the stoic acceptance characteristic of her kind. Death in service to the Craftworld was honorable, and so long as the warrior's spirit stone was eventually recovered, his essence would join the infinity circuit rather than falling prey to she who thirsts. "We will recover it before departing," she stated firmly. "No," Cassandra countered, her tone brooking no argument. "That path leads to failure. Imperial reinforcements will secure the spirit stone within hours, placing it beyond our reach. Our priority must be returning to Ulthwé with the knowledge I now carry." The young seer bristled at being contradicted so directly, especially by one who, despite her transformation, remained at least partially human. "You presume to dictate Eldari matters. The recovery of our fallen is sacred duty." "I dictate nothing," Cassandra replied with unexpected gentleness. "I merely report what the skein of fate reveals. The dire Avenger's spirit stone will eventually find its way back to Eldar hands, though not for several human decades. Its journey is part of a larger pattern, one we should not disrupt." Before Morai-Heg could formulate a response to this unsettling pronouncement, they emerged onto the ceremonial balcony Cassandra had described. The platform extended from the western face of the temple, offering a panoramic view of the forested valley below, now darkened by night save for the flashes of Imperial weapons fire to the east. As predicted, Ranger Elythrai awaited them, her form nearly invisible against the shadows of the temple wall. "The human artillery concentrates on the eastern approach," the ranger reported without preamble, "but they have infantry establishing a perimeter around the entire structure. 15 minutes at most before this section is surrounded." Her eyes widened slightly as she took in Cassandra's transformed appearance, but with characteristic ranger pragmatism, she asked only, "The Farseer?" "Sacrificed," Morai-Heg answered, her voice tight with contained emotion. "The ritual required it. Her spirit stone is secured." She gestured to Cassandra. "The human now carries the tier's essence, as was foreseen." Elythrai accepted this with a slight nod, though her posture conveyed skepticism about the outcome. "Our path back to the webway gate is compromised. Imperial forces have established checkpoints throughout the forest, and their aerial vehicles perform regular sweeps." "There is an alternative," Cassandra interjected, her gaze fixed on some middle distance as she consulted the newly acquired foresight. "The temple complex extends underground, connecting to a network of caves that eventually surface near the planetary magnetic north. From there, we can circle around to approach the webway gate from a direction the humans aren't monitoring." "That route would take days," Elythrai objected. And the enslaver still hunts. The enslaver pursues the psychic emanations of the Tear, Cassandra explained. Now that those energies are contained within me, I can suppress them temporarily, enough to mask our presence if we remain in motion. Morai-Heg studied the transformed human with growing unease. Cassandra's confidence and capabilities were expanding by the minute as she integrated more of the ancient foresight. While this served their immediate tactical needs, it raised disturbing questions about what she might ultimately become once the integration was complete. The underground passage, you're certain it remains intact after all these millennia? The young seer asked. Certain enough, Cassandra replied. The temple's foundation extends deep into natural caverns that were reinforced with wraithbone during its construction. While sections may have collapsed, the Tear's knowledge includes awareness of alternative routes. Another artillery shell struck the temple, closer to their position this time. The ancient structure groaned in protest, psychoreactive materials absorbing the impact, but beginning to reach their limits after sustained bombardment. We have no better option, Morai-Heg decided reluctantly. Lead on, human. Cassandra, she corrected gently. I may be changed, but my name remains my own. Without waiting for a response, she turned and placed her palm against a seemingly solid section of the balcony floor. The wraithbone responded instantly, flowing aside to reveal a spiraling staircase descending into darkness below the temple. The priestesses used these passages to commune with the planetary spirit, Cassandra explained as they began their descent. Before the fall, this world was a living extension of Eldari consciousness, a maiden world where reality and psychic perception merged seamlessly. You speak as if you witnessed it personally, Morai-Heg observed sharply. In a sense, I did. The Tear contains the memories and visions of those who created it. Cassandra's voice echoed slightly in the narrow passage. I see Tyr'esya as it once was, a paradise of crystalline spires and living gardens, its skies filled with vehicles that moved by thought alone. And I see what it will become, thousands of years from now, when humanity has fallen and new civilizations rise from the ashes of the old. Such foresight should not be possible, Morai-Heg muttered, more to herself than to her companions. Even our most gifted seers cannot penetrate the skein so far into the future with any clarity. The Tear is not merely a repository of individual foresight, Cassandra replied. It is a confluence, the combined precognitive power of an entire seer council, preserved at the moment when their abilities were heightened by the approaching cataclysm of the fall. Such an instrument was never meant to exist, which is why it was hidden away and protected by rituals of sacrifice. The staircase ended abruptly at a vast underground chamber, whose full dimensions were impossible to discern in the darkness. As they entered, bioluminescent organisms on the walls and ceiling began to glow with soft blue-green light, revealing a space that blended natural cave formations with Eldari architectural elements. Stalactites merged seamlessly with graceful wraithbone arches. Natural pools were ringed with crystalline structures that amplified their reflections into complex holographic patterns. The heart chamber, Elythrai identified with quiet awe. I thought such places existed only in legend, nodes where the Eldari Empire connected directly to a planet's geomantic energies. There were 12 such chambers on Tyr'esya, Cassandra confirmed. This is the only one that remains intact, protected by the temple's psychic wards and its physical isolation. She approached one of the pools, where the water's surface remained perfectly still despite their presence. Kneeling beside it, she allowed her fingers to brush the water, which reacted not with ripples but with pulses of light that spread outward in geometric patterns. The planet remembers, she whispered. Beneath the human settlements and terraforming, the original Eldari world soul slumbers. Is this relevant to our escape? Morai-Heg asked impatiently. "The humans will eventually discover the passage we used. We should continue moving." Cassandra rose gracefully, her movements increasingly fluid and Eldar-like as her transformation progressed. "It is directly relevant. The heart chamber connects to the cave network I mentioned, but the passages are sealed with psychic locks that respond only to Eldari presence, or to the planet mind itself." She gestured toward the far side of the chamber, where a seemingly solid wall of rock stood. "I must awaken enough of the planet mind to grant us passage. The process will take approximately 10 minutes. And the psychic emanations of such an awakening," Elythrai asked cautiously, "will they draw the enslaver to our position?" "Briefly, yes," Cassandra admitted. "But the planet mind itself will shield us once roused. Its consciousness exists partially outside conventional reality, making it difficult for the enslaver to track." Before either Eldar could object further, Cassandra had returned to the central pool and submerged both hands fully into its crystalline waters. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The bioluminescence throughout the chamber intensified, and the water began to glow with inner light that shifted through colors no human eye could normally perceive. Morai-Heg gasped softly as she felt the psychic pressure building in the chamber. "She's actually doing it," she murmured to Elythrai, "awakening a dormant world mind. Such techniques were lost even before the fall. The knowledge was preserved in the Tear," Cassandra explained without turning, her voice taking on harmonics that resonated with the growing energies in the chamber. "The seers who created it understood that such ancient methods might one day be needed again." The pool's glow spread to the other water bodies throughout the chamber, then to the crystalline formations, until the entire space was illuminated with pulsing, shifting light. The stone floor beneath them began to vibrate subtly, not with the destructive force of the surface bombardment, but with a rhythmic pattern that suggested a massive heartbeat deep within the planet. "She awakens," Cassandra announced, her voice layered with an echo that seemed to come from the chamber itself. "Tyr'esya remembers her first children after millennia of silence." The solid rock wall at the chamber's far end began to shimmer, its molecular structure temporarily altered by the planet mind's awakening consciousness. What had appeared to be stone revealed itself as a sophisticated psychoreactive barrier, which now parted like a living curtain to reveal a tunnel beyond. "Our path is open," Cassandra said, withdrawing her hands from the pool. Where the water touched her skin, it left behind traces of luminescence that flowed beneath her surface like living circuitry. "But we must hurry. The planet mind cannot maintain full consciousness for long without proper psychic infrastructure to support it." As if to emphasize her warning, a psychic tremor rippled through the chamber. But this disturbance came not from the planet mind's awakening but from above. A distant, hungry howl that all three recognized immediately. "The enslaver," Elythrai confirmed grimly. "It has detected the psychic surge and approaches rapidly." "Move," ordered Morai-Heg, all previous doubts temporarily set aside in the face of immediate danger. Through the passage now, they raced into the newly revealed tunnel, which descended at a gentle angle into the planet's depths. Behind them, the psychoreactive barrier resealed itself just as another tremor shook the chamber, this one far more violent, accompanied by the distinctive sound of wraithbone under stress. "The enslaver has entered the temple complex," Cassandra reported, her transformed senses allowing her to track the entity's movements. "It tears through the psychic wards, seeking the power it detected." "Will the barrier hold against it?" Elythrai asked, nodding toward the sealed passage behind them. "Temporarily. The planet mind actively opposes its intrusion now that it has been awakened to the threat." Cassandra's expression became distant as she accessed the Tear's foresight. "We have approximately 4 hours before the enslaver finds an alternative route into the cave system. By then, We must reach the northern exit. They continued deeper into the tunnel network, guided by Cassandra's newfound knowledge and the faint bioluminescence that activated in response to their presence. The passages twisted and branched in patterns that would have been hopelessly confusing without her direction, sometimes widening into chambers filled with crystal formations of impossible beauty, other times narrowing to crawl spaces that barely accommodated their passage. Throughout their journey, they could feel subtle tremors through the rock, some from the continuing imperial bombardment of the temple above, others from the enslavers' pursuit, and still others from the planet mind itself, as it stirred from millennia of dormancy. The human forces have breached the temple's outer chambers, Cassandra announced after they had been traveling for approximately 2 hours. They've discovered the passage we used to reach the heart chamber and are sending exploration teams to follow. How many? Asked Alaric practically. 3 squads, 12 soldiers each, with Auspex equipment and Vox relays to maintain communication with their surface command. Morai-Heg considered this information with a frown. They cannot catch us at our current pace, but they could potentially alert forces near our exit point. There's another concern, Cassandra added, her tone growing more troubled. The planet's governor, my father, has requested orbital surveillance of the entire region. Once we emerge, we'll be exposed to detection from space. The Webway Gate is still our best option for extraction, Alaric stated. But with human forces establishing perimeters and aerial surveillance, reaching it undetected will be challenging. They paused at a junction, where 3 identical tunnels diverged. Cassandra closed her eyes briefly, consulting both the Tear's knowledge and her own foresight. The leftmost passage is most direct, but passes beneath a section of the cave system that has grown unstable due to human mining activity, she reported. The right leads eventually to the surface, but emerges too close to an Imperial monitoring station. The center path is longer but avoids both hazards. Center path then, decided Morai-Heg. Time is precious, but not at the cost of detection. As they proceeded down the chosen tunnel, Alaric moved closer to Morai-Heg, pitching her voice too low for Cassandra to hear even with her enhanced senses. The human's transformation accelerates, the ranger observed. Her movement patterns, speech cadence, even her thought processes are increasingly Eldari, yet she retains elements of human unpredictability. It concerns me as well, Morai-Heg admitted quietly. The Tear was never meant to be contained within a human vessel, no matter how extensively prepared. The long-term consequences cannot be predicted with any certainty. She guides us accurately for now, Alaric acknowledged. But what happens when we reach Ulthwé? Will your Seer Council accept what she has become? It was a question Morai-Heg had been avoiding in her own thoughts. As the Farseer's apprentice and now heir to her position, she would be responsible for presenting Cassandra and explaining Elythrai's sacrifice to the Council. The political implications were enormous, potentially divisive at a time when Ulthwé could least afford internal conflict. The Council will recognize the necessity, she replied, with more confidence than she felt. The approaching Hive fleet presents an existential threat. With the Tear's foresight contained within the Who, within Cassandra, we have our best chance of navigating the coming crisis. Alaric looked unconvinced, but nodded acceptance of the young seer's assessment. As a ranger who spent most of her time away from the Craftworld, she would not have to deal with the immediate political fallout. Ahead of them, Cassandra had paused, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond normal hearing range. Something approaches, she warned. Not the enslaver, something else, something drawn by the planet mind's awakening. The tunnel around them shuddered, small fragments of rock breaking loose from the ceiling. The bioluminescence that had been guiding their way flickered erratically, then intensified to almost painful brightness. Planet-mind activity increasing dramatically, Cassandra reported, her voice tense. It's responding to Emperor's blood. The human expletive that slipped through her usual composure underscored the severity of whatever she had detected. Before either Eldar could question her further, the tunnel ahead of them began to transform. The rock itself flowed like liquid, reshaping into a barrier of crystalline structure that sealed their path completely. "The planet mind is attempting to protect us," Cassandra explained urgently. "It senses a threat greater than the enslaver approaching from deeper within the cave system." "What could possibly?" Morai-Heg began, but stopped as realization dawned. "No, it cannot be." "Necrons," Elythrai confirmed grimly, her enhanced ranger senses detecting what the others could not yet perceive. "The distinctive energy signature of their technology is unmistakable, even through solid rock." "Impossible," Morai-Heg protested. "There have been no records of Necron activity in this sector for millennia." "The planet mind remembers them," Cassandra said, her eyes unfocused as she accessed knowledge beyond her personal experience. "During the War in Heaven, Tyr'esya was the site of a major conflict between the Old Ones and the C'tan. The Necrons established a tomb complex deep beneath the northern hemisphere, hibernating until awakened by— By what?" pressed Morai-Heg when Cassandra hesitated. "By the activation of ancient Eldari technology," she finished reluctantly. "The Tyr's power signature was similar enough to Old One technology to trigger their awakening protocols." The implications were staggering. They had not merely awakened the planet mind and drawn the attention of an enslaver. They had potentially roused an entire Necron tomb world from millions of years of dormancy. "We must change course immediately," Elythrai stated. "If even a small Necron force has reactivated, they will begin systematic sweep patterns through these tunnel networks." Cassandra nodded, already turning back toward the junction they had passed. "The rightmost tunnel. It's our only viable alternative now. We'll need to risk the Imperial monitoring station." As they retraced their steps with new urgency, the subtle tremors beneath their feet took on a different quality, more rhythmic, almost mechanical. The sounds of distant energy discharges echoed faintly through the rock. "The Necrons engage the enslaver," Cassandra reported, her senses extending far beyond normal limitations. "The entity's psychic nature confuses their targeting systems, but they deploy in increasing numbers." "How many?" asked Morai-Heg. "Dozens activated already, hundreds more in various stages of awakening." Cassandra's expression was grim. "This tomb complex is larger than I initially perceived." They reached the junction and took the right passage without slowing, all three moving with the fluid grace of those accustomed to operating in hostile territory. The tunnel began to slope upward more steeply, occasionally requiring them to climb over fallen rock formations or squeeze through narrowed sections where the ceiling had partially collapsed. "The humans have detected the Necron energy signatures," Cassandra announced after they had been climbing for nearly an hour. "Their Auspex readings have triggered high-level alerts. The governor has declared a full planetary emergency and requested immediate inquisitorial intervention." "Inquisitorial," Elythri's tone sharpened with concern. "That escalates matters considerably. If an inquisitor arrives before we can depart." She didn't need to complete the thought. All of them understood the implications. The Inquisition had resources and authority far beyond a colonial government. Their arrival would mean quarantine protocols, specialized psyker hunters, and potentially even limited exterminatus actions if they deemed the threat severe enough. "How long until the nearest inquisitorial forces could respond?" Morai-Heg asked. 3 standard days at best," Cassandra replied. "But the astropathic distress call has already been sent, The wheels are in motion. They continued upward with renewed determination, all too aware that the complexity of their situation was increasing by the hour. What had begun as a targeted retrieval mission had somehow evolved into a potential multi-species conflict involving Eldar, humans, Necrons, and warp entities, with the fate of an entire planet hanging in the balance. After another hour of difficult ascent, they reached a section where the tunnel widened into a small chamber with 3 exits. Unlike the natural formations they had been traversing, this chamber showed clear signs of deliberate construction, its walls smooth, and inlaid with the same crystalline materials they had seen in the temple complex. Another Eldari installation, Morai-Heg identified, smaller than the temple but connected to the same psychic network. A waypoint, Cassandra confirmed, used by the priestesses when traveling between the temple and various sacred sites across the planet. It should contain. She moved to a specific section of wall and pressed her palm against it. The crystal inlays responded to her touch, glowing briefly before a hidden compartment slid open. Within the compartment rested several devices of obvious Eldar manufacture, slender rods of wraithbone, small crystalline spheres, and what appeared to be communication equipment. Emergency supplies, Elythrai noted with approval, examining the cache. Some of these are still functional despite their age. The wraithbone has sustained itself by drawing energy from the planet mind, Cassandra explained, selecting one of the crystalline spheres. This will help us avoid detection when we reach the surface. It generates a limited hollow field, not perfect stealth, but enough to confuse Imperial Auspex systems if we remain in motion. Morai-Heg took one of the wraithbone rods, which hummed faintly in response to her touch. A psychic dampener. It won't hide us from direct observation, but it will mask our psychic signatures from both the enslaver and any Imperial psychers your father might have requisitioned. Elythrai, ever practical, claimed the communication device. If this can be attuned to our ghost ship's frequencies, we may be able to request extraction directly rather than risking the webway gate, which the humans may have discovered by now. As they equipped themselves with these unexpected resources, Cassandra suddenly stiffened, her transformed eyes widening slightly. "What is it?" Morai-Heg asked, immediately alert. "A new presence has entered the system," Cassandra replied, her voice distant as she accessed the tier's foresight. "A vessel neither human nor Necron." "Eldar," suggested Elythrai hopefully. "Perhaps Ulthwé sent reinforcement when our mission duration exceeded expectations." "No," Cassandra's expression grew troubled. "The signature is chaotic, distorted. It broadcasts on frequencies that hurt the mind to perceive." Morai-Heg and Elythrai exchanged alarmed glances. "Chaos," the ranger whispered. "The great enemy has arrived." Drawn by the same convergence of energies that awoke the Necrons and attracted the enslaver, Morai-Heg theorized grimly. The Tier's activation, the planet mind's awakening, the Necron technology activating, all create ripples in the immaterium that those who dwell there would sense. "Not just sense," Cassandra corrected. "They were guided here by a beacon that has been transmitting for decades, disguised within the human colony's communication array." "Impossible," Elythrai objected. "Imperial tech priests scan routinely for such corruption." "Not when the corruption exists in the blind spots of their own dogma," Cassandra replied. "The beacon was designed to appear as a standard Mechanicus devotional signal, one that happens to resonate on frequencies the great enemy can detect." The implications were staggering. If Cassandra was correct, the human colony had been unwittingly serving as a lure for chaos forces, potentially for generations. It suggested a level of long-term planning and infiltration that even the Eldar, with their millennia-spanning perspectives, found disturbing. "We must accelerate our extraction," Morai-Heg decided. The arrival of chaos elements transforms this from a dangerous situation to a potentially catastrophic one. If they secure either the temple complex or the Necron technology, she didn't need to finish the thought. All of them understood the horrors that could result from chaos forces acquiring either ancient Eldari psychic technology or Necron hypertech. The surface exit is less than an hour's journey from here, Cassandra informed them, pointing to the leftmost of the 3 passages leading from the chamber. But we will emerge into an area of increased Imperial activity. Their forces are establishing a perimeter around what they believe to be the extent of the Necron tomb complex. And the Webway Gate, asked Elythrai, currently uncompromised but under orbital surveillance. Approaching it directly would be detected immediately. Then we must use the hollow field and psychic dampeners to reach a position where we can safely contact our ghost ship, Morai-Heg decided. If it remains where we left it, concealed within the ruined webway structure, its system should be able to triangulate our position from even a brief transmission. With their plan established, they gathered the remaining functional devices from the ancient cache and proceeded into the left passage, ascending toward the surface of a world that had suddenly become the nexus of multiple converging threats: human, Necron, and now chaos. Behind them, echoing through the tunnel network, came the distinctive sounds of Necron Gauss weapons discharging, growing neither closer nor more distant but steadily more numerous. The tomb's awakening was accelerating, and soon, an ancient race of soulless metal warriors would emerge onto the surface of Tyr'esya, bringing with them a technological horror not seen in this sector for millions of years. Above, the Imperial forces prepared for an enemy they barely understood, while in orbit, a vessel bearing the corrupted signatures of the ruinous powers approached with unknowable but certainly malevolent intentions. And between all these forces moved 3 figures, 2 Eldar and 1 transformed human, carrying knowledge that could alter the fate of countless worlds, if only they could escape the convergence of threats they had inadvertently helped set in motion. Chapter 5: Convergence. The night sky above Tyr'esya blazed with unnatural light, the emerald glow of Necron technology erupting from newly opened tomb entrances, the amber flashes of Imperial artillery, and high in orbit, the distorted crimson halo that surrounded the recently arrived Chaos vessel. A convergence of ancient enemies played out above a world that had once been an Eldari paradise, now a nexus of conflict that would shape the fate of the sector. From the concealment of a dense copse of trees, Cassandra observed it all with her transformed senses. The tears fragments pulsed beneath her skin, responding to the psychic turmoil that engulfed the planet. At her side, Morai-Heg and Elythrai maintained watchful silence, the Wraithbone psychic dampeners clutched in their hands like talismans against the gathering storm. The Imperial forces establish a defensive line approximately 2 kilometers south, Cassandra reported, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that had become more pronounced as her transformation progressed. They deploy heavy weapons and armored units in anticipation of the Necron emergence. They cannot hope to prevail against a fully awakened tomb world, Morai-Heg observed. Not with mere colonial forces. They seek only to contain the threat until reinforcements arrive, Cassandra replied. My father follows protocol exactly as his training dictates. Establish perimeter, request support, hold position. And the Chaos vessel? Elythrai asked, her ranger's pragmatism focused on immediate threats. Cassandra's expression darkened. It maintains high orbit beyond Imperial weapon range. Smaller craft have begun to deploy to the surface, concentrating on the temple complex. They seek the same power we claimed. Too late, Morai-Heg stated with grim satisfaction. The Tear is secure. Yes, but they will not depart empty-handed. Cassandra's transformed eyes unfocused slightly as she accessed the foresight granted by the Tear. I see cultists entering the heart chamber, communing with the awakened planet mind, corrupting its nascent consciousness with their touch. If they establish control over the planet mind, Elythrai began. Then this world is lost, completed Morai-Heg. It would become a demon world within a generation. Cassandra shuddered, the human aspects of her nature still recoiling from such horrors despite her transformation. All paths of foresight involving prolonged human presence on Tyr'esya now end in darkness and corruption. The convergence of Necron, chaos, and human forces creates a crucible from which only suffering can emerge. Then we must contact our vessel and depart immediately, Elythrai stated. The fate of this world is regrettable but secondary to our mission. Ulthwé must be warned of both the Necron awakening in this sector and the Chaos incursion. The Ranger activated the ancient Eldari communication device they had recovered from the underground cache. It hummed with crystalline tones as it sought a connection with their ghost ship, still concealed within the ruined webway gate kilometers away. Signal established, Elythrai reported after several tense moments. But the connection is unstable. The Chaos vessel broadcasts interference across multiple frequencies, both material and psychic. Enough to transmit coordinates for extraction, asked Morai-Heg. Yes, but not with precision. I can designate a general area only, perhaps within a radius of several hundred meters. That will suffice, the young seer decided. Transmit our position and request immediate extraction. The hollow field should mask our presence from orbital surveillance, long enough for the ghost ship to reach us. As Elythrai manipulated the ancient device to send their message, Cassandra suddenly stiffened, her head turning sharply toward the east. Something approaches, she warned, something familiar. Before either Eldar could respond, the distinctive sound of human footsteps moving through underbrush reached them. Not the coordinated advance of military units, but the determined progress of a single individual. A figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of their position, illuminated by the distant flashes of weaponry. Governor-elect Cassandra Helfort stood before them, a bolt pistol held with the practiced confidence of a former Imperial Guard officer. His weathered face bore the strain of recent events, but his eyes remained clear and focused, primarily on his transformed daughter. "Cassandra," he said simply, his voice betraying no emotion beyond a slight wavering on her name. "Father," she acknowledged him with a nod that was neither fully human nor entirely Eldar in its graceful economy of movement. "You found me. I've been tracking you since you escaped the transport," he replied. "Your lifespan has changed, but parental instinct is a powerful navigational tool." The two Eldar had shifted to flanking positions, ready to defend or attack as needed, but Cassandra raised a hand to stay any action. "He comes alone," she informed them, "against all protocol and sense." Helfort's gaze flicked briefly to the Eldar before returning to his daughter. "You understand what's happening here, don't you? What's been awakened beneath our colony? I understand more than any human mind was meant to comprehend," Cassandra answered, a note of sorrow entering her voice. "The tomb world, the chaos vessel, the corrupted beacon that has been drawing them here for decades. I see it all, Father, and I see what comes next." "Then tell me," he demanded, the bolt pistol unwavering in his grip though it pointed at no one specifically. "Tell me how to save my people." Morai-Heg made a small sound of derision. "Your colony is already lost, human. The convergence of forces here ensures its destruction regardless of what actions you take now." "Is that true?" Helfort asked his daughter directly, ignoring the Eldar seer's pronouncement. Cassandra closed her eyes briefly, consulting the branching threads of foresight that the Tear had granted her. When she opened them again, They shimmered with colors no human eyes should contain. "There is one path," she said finally. "Narrow and requiring great sacrifice, but it exists. You must order an immediate and complete evacuation, not to orbit, but to the southern continent. The Necron tomb complex is concentrated in the north, and their initial expansion will focus on reclaiming their ancient territories before turning attention elsewhere." Evacuation. Helfort's expression hardened. "There are over 10,000 colonists, Cassandra. The logistical challenges alone would be insurmountable under normal circumstances," she agreed. "But these are not normal circumstances. The arrival of the Chaos vessel has changed the equation. It will engage the Imperial orbital platforms within the next 6 hours, creating a diversion that can mask the movement of ground transports to the south." Helfort studied his daughter with a mixture of concern and growing acceptance. Whatever transformation she had undergone, some essential aspect of Cassandra remained. Her pragmatic approach to problem-solving, her consideration for lives that could be saved rather than dwelling on inevitable losses. "And after reaching the southern continent," he asked, already mentally calculating what would be required to implement such an evacuation. "Fortify and hold until Imperial reinforcements arrive," Cassandra instructed. "The inquisitorial forces responding to your distress call will establish a quarantine perimeter and eventually extract all surviving colonists. The planet itself will likely be subjected to virus bombing or similar exterminatus protocols once evacuation is complete." "You seem very certain of this future," Helfort observed. "It is the most probable outcome among thousands I can perceive," she replied. "But it requires your immediate action, Father. Every hour of delay reduces the survival probability by approximately 12%. The governor's grip on his bolt pistol tightened momentarily before relaxing. With a deliberate motion, he holstered the weapon and activated his personal Vox unit. "This is Governor-elect Helfort to all colonial forces. Implement Emergency Protocol Theta immediately. I repeat, Emergency Protocol Theta, authorization Helfort Alpha 79er. This is not a drill." He looked back at his daughter as confirmation responses began flooding his Vox unit. "Theta is our code for complete civilian evacuation in face of overwhelming hostile forces. The protocols include relocating to our southern continent emergency facilities." "You already had contingencies in place," Cassandra observed with a hint of pride. "I was Imperial Guard before I was a governor," Helfort replied simply. "Always prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." He hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him since he found them. "What happens to you now, Cassandra?" The transformed human glanced briefly at her Eldar companions before answering. "I go with them to Ulthwé. The knowledge I carry is vital to their Craftworld's survival against an approaching Tyrannid hive fleet." "You're not coming back, are you?" It wasn't really a question. "I cannot," she admitted softly. "What I have become exists between human and Eldar, accepted fully by neither, but necessary to both in the darkness that approaches. The paths of foresight show me serving as a bridge between our kind in the wars to come." Helfort nodded slowly, the resigned acceptance of a man who had seen too much of the galaxy's horrors to be truly surprised by one more cruel separation. "The Imperium would not be kind to someone with your abilities, particularly given your association with Xenos." "No," she agreed, "they would not." From somewhere to the south, the distinctive rumble of Imperial transports powering up could be heard as the evacuation began in earnest. Helfort's Vox unit continued to chime with status reports and confirmation codes as the colony's carefully planned emergency protocols activated. "Our extraction approaches," Morai-Heg announced, pointing to the western sky where a shimmer of displaced air suggested the ghost ship's cloaked advance. "You should go, Father," Cassandra urged. "Your people need leadership now more than ever." Helfort straightened, his military bearing reasserting itself. "The Emperor protects," he said formally, then added in a softer tone, "Be safe, daughter, or as safe as one can be in times like these. And you, Father, the path I've shown you offers the best chance, but it remains treacherous. Trust nothing that comes from orbit until you've confirmed Imperial identification protocols personally." With a final nod that contained all the things left unsaid between them, Governor-elect Helfort turned and disappeared back into the forest, headed toward his evacuating colony and whatever fate awaited him there. "A more reasonable human than most," Elythrai observed once he was gone. His restraint was unexpected. "He is a practical man," Cassandra replied, "and he recognized that I am no longer fully his daughter, just as I am not fully your kind either." Before either Eldar could respond to this philosophical observation, the air above them shimmered more intensely as the ghost ship decloaked just enough for them to perceive its landing ramp extending toward the ground. The elegant Eldari vessel's outlines remained blurred by its advanced holofield technology, rendering it nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. "Quickly," urged Morai-Heg. "The Chaos forces have detected the ship's energy signature. They dispatch interceptors from their main vessel." They sprinted toward the waiting craft, the psychic dampeners still masking their presence from the enslaver and other warp entities that might sense their movement. As they reached the ramp, a violent tremor shook the ground beneath them, far more powerful than the previous seismic activities. "The Necron tomb complex fully activates," Cassandra reported, her enhanced senses perceiving events kilometers away. "Their primary awakening protocols have completed. War machines rise from beneath the surface." From the north, a column of sickly green light erupted into the night sky, a Necron resurrection beam that signaled the emergence of major tomb assets. In response, the Imperial artillery redirected its barrage, filling the air with the screaming trajectory of shells designed to destroy tanks, but woefully inadequate against Necron monoliths and other heavy constructs. The three fugitives reached the ghost ship's interior just as the ramp began to close behind them. Inside, the surviving aspect warriors awaited, 4 elegant killers whose expertise had kept them alive through the chaos of their mission. "Farseer Elythrai?" asked Nelthrain the Howling Banshee, immediately noting the ancient seer's absence. "Sacrificed," Morai-Heg answered simply, holding up the spirit stone that contained their leader's soul. "Her essence is preserved, and will join the infinity circuit upon our return." The aspect warriors accepted this with somber nods. Death in service to the Craftworld was expected and honored, particularly when the soul was successfully preserved from the hunger of she who thirsts. Their attention then turned to Cassandra, whose transformed appearance clearly took them aback despite Eldar self-control. The crystalline patterns beneath her skin pulsed with inner light, and her eyes shifted colors as they adjusted to the ghost ship's interior illumination. "What is this creature?" demanded the Dark Reaper, his skull-masked helmet turning toward Morai-Heg for explanation. "The vessel of the Tear of Morai-Heg," the young seer replied formally, "transformed by the ritual as the Farseer foresaw. She carries the knowledge we sought, preserved within her altered consciousness." The aspect warriors exchanged glances, centuries of indoctrination in Eldar supremacy warring with practical necessity. Eventually, Nelthrain addressed Cassandra directly. "Can you access the foresight? See the paths that will guide Ulthwé against the great devourer?" "I see many paths," Cassandra confirmed, her voice resonating with harmonics that no human vocal cords should produce. "Some lead to survival, others to annihilation. The difference lies in choices not yet made and alliances not yet formed. The ghost ship shuddered slightly as it accelerated upward, its advanced propulsion systems engaging to lift them rapidly through Tyr'esya's atmosphere. On the primary display, they could see the unfolding chaos beneath them. Imperial forces establishing evacuation convoys while simultaneously engaging the emerging Necron constructs. And from the temple complex, the disturbing crimson glow of chaos rituals already underway. The Webway Gate coordinates are set, reported the ship's pilot, another survivor of their original expedition. We can transition once we break atmosphere. Make all possible speed, ordered Morai-Heg. The Chaos vessel has launched interceptors to pursue us. Indeed, the display showed multiple smaller craft rising from the corrupted ship in high orbit, baroque constructions of metal and flesh that defied practical aerodynamic principles, propelled by technologies that offended rational physics and sanity alike. They will not reach us in time, the pilot assured them, his hands dancing across wraithbone control interfaces with the fluid grace characteristic of their species. The ghost ship's velocity exceeds their pursuit capabilities. Cassandra moved to stand before the main viewport, watching as the atmosphere thinned around them, and the black void of space gradually replaced the broiling chaos of the planet below. Her transformed eyes perceived more than just the visible spectrum, detecting the currents of fate that swirled around them like solar winds. "The convergence continues," she murmured, more to herself than to her companions. "Even as we depart, the threads tangle and weave new patterns." "What do you see?" asked Morai-Heg, approaching to stand beside her. Despite her initial skepticism, the young seer had developed a grudging respect for Cassandra's unique perspective, neither fully Eldar nor human, but something that transcended the limitations of both. "Imperial reinforcements will arrive in 4 days," Cassandra replied, her gaze distant. "An inquisitorial cruiser, followed by elements of battle fleet Gothic. They will engage both the Chaos forces and the awakened Necrons, resulting in a 3-way conflict that leaves the planet uninhabitable but prevents either enemy from claiming total victory." "And your father, the human colonists?" Cassandra's expression softened slightly. "Most will survive if they follow the evacuation plan. The southern continent remains untouched long enough for imperial extraction. My father leads the defense personally until the inquisitorial forces arrive." A faint smile touched her lips. "He lives, though his path afterward takes him far from this sector." The ghost ship broke free of Tyr'esya's gravity well, accelerating toward the coordinates where they would transition to the Webway for their journey back to Ulthwé. Behind them, the Chaos interceptors continued their pursuit, closing the distance but still too far to present an immediate threat. "Webway transition in 30 seconds, announced the pilot. "And what of our path?" Morai-Heg asked more quietly. "What awaits us upon return to Ulthwé?" "Complexity," Cassandra answered carefully. "Your council will be divided over my existence. Some will see the necessity and pragmatic value, others will perceive dangerous corruption of Eldar knowledge." She paused, accessing deeper levels of foresight. "But the approaching Hive fleet forces their hand. Survival outweighs doctrinal purity." Before Morai-Heg could press for more specific predictions, the viewscreen flashed with sudden, blinding light. The Chaos vessel had fired its main weaponry, not at them, but at the Imperial orbital platforms. The resulting detonations cascaded through Tyr'esya's defensive network, creating a chain reaction of explosions that illuminated the planet's orbit like a necklace of miniature suns. "Webway transition occurring now," the pilot reported calmly, undistracted by the destruction behind them. The familiar sensation of Webway transition washed over them, a momentary disorientation as the ghost ship slipped from real space into the ancient network of tunnels created by the Old Ones and inherited by the Eldar before their fall. The violent tableau of Tyr'esya vanished, replaced by the impossible geometries and prismatic light patterns of the webway. Course set for Ulthwé, confirmed the pilot. Estimated arrival, 7 standard cycles. With the immediate danger behind them, the atmosphere aboard the ghost ship shifted subtly. The aspect warriors retired to meditation chambers to begin the rituals that would transition them from combat mindsets back to their civilian identities. Elythrai moved to the communications array to prepare a detailed report for the Craftworld's ruling council. Cassandra found herself alone with Morai-Heg in the ship's observation dome, a crystalline chamber designed for contemplation of the webway's unique beauty during transit. The psychedelic patterns of energy and reality-spanning architecture flowed around them like a river of liquid potential. 7 cycles, Morai-Heg mused. Time enough for you to prepare for what awaits on Ulthwé. My preparation began months ago, Cassandra replied, when the tear first touched my dreams across the gulf of space. Everything since has been the unfolding of that initial contact. The young seer studied her with open curiosity now that they were beyond immediate peril. You speak like one of our Farseers, yet retain elements of human perspective. A true hybrid consciousness. I wonder what Elythrai would make of the final result of her planning. She knew, Cassandra stated with certainty. Not every detail, but the broad strokes, what I would become, how the council would react, the role I would play in the coming wars. Her sacrifice was made with full awareness of its consequences. Morai-Heg's expression tightened slightly at the mention of her mentor's death. And you? Did you foresee your transformation when you agreed to the ritual? I saw fragments, Cassandra admitted. Enough to understand that I would never return to my former life, that I would be forever between worlds, neither fully human nor truly Eldar. But I also saw the alternative paths. And they were worse. Infinitely. Cassandra turned her transformed gaze back to the swirling energies of the webway. In all other futures, Ulthwé falls to the Tyranids within a standard year. The cascade of consequences spreads outward from that point. Other craftworlds destroyed, imperial sectors overrun, billions of lives extinguished as the hive mind's shadow extends across the galaxy. One sacrifice to prevent countless others, Morai-Heg observed. A calculation my people have made many times throughout our long history. As have mine, Cassandra countered. Though humans rarely have the foresight to understand the full implications of their choices. It is both their greatest weakness and their greatest strength. They act on incomplete information, guided by intuition and emotion as much as reason. And now, do you still consider yourself human in any meaningful sense? It was a profound question, one that Cassandra had been contemplating since the moment the tear's fragments had embedded themselves beneath her skin. The answer was neither simple nor static. It shifted with each passing hour as her transformation continued to unfold. I am what necessity required me to become, she said finally. A convergence point, just as Tyr'esya became a convergence of forces. My humanity remains in my capacity for empathy, in my understanding of both species' strengths and flaws. My Eldar aspects manifest in my foresight and my perception of the galaxy's deeper patterns. She turned to face the young seer directly. But definitions matter less than purpose. The knowledge I carry must guide Ulthwé through the approaching storm. Whether I am human, Eldar, or something entirely new is secondary to that imperative. Morai-Heg nodded slowly, accepting this pragmatic assessment. When we arrive, I will present you to the council as the Farseer's chosen vessel, the fulfillment of her final vision. With Elythrai's spirit stone as evidence of her sacrifice, Even the most skeptical counselors will be compelled to at least consider what you offer. Some will never accept me, Cassandra warned, accessing the relevant threads of foresight, particularly those of the more conservative aspects, but they need not accept to benefit from the knowledge I provide. The ghost ship continued its journey through the webway, a tiny mote of life and purpose, navigating the ancient pathways between worlds. Within its crystalline chambers, the survivors of the Tyr'esya expedition prepared in their various ways for the reception that awaited them on Ulthwé. The explanations they would need to provide, the tactical information they would report, the loss of their Farseer they would formalize. And at the center of it all, neither fully human nor truly Eldar, Cassandra Helfort, who was becoming something else, contemplated the convergence of fates that had transformed her into a living repository of ancient foresight. The Tear of Morai-Heg pulsed within her transformed body, its crystalline fragments continuing to reshape her on levels both physical and psychic. The last Seer of Tyr'esya had died so that something new could be born, a bridge between species, a nexus of possible futures, a hybrid consciousness that might guide both humans and Eldar through the gathering darkness. Whether this experiment in transcendence would ultimately prove salvation or folly remained to be seen. But as the ghost ship glided through the reality-spanning architecture of the webway, one thing was certain. The patterns of fate had been irrevocably altered, and the ripples of that change would eventually touch worlds far beyond Tyr'esya's blood-soaked soil. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, a small light of unprecedented possibility had been kindled, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably real. Deep within Ulthwé Craftworld, in a chamber reserved for the most sensitive deliberations of the Seer Council, 12 ancient Eldar gathered in a perfect circle. At their center stood two figures, a young seer named for the crone goddess of fate, and a being that defied easy classification, neither fully human nor truly Eldar, her skin etched with crystalline patterns that pulsed with inner light. So spoke the most senior of the council members, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. The last Seer of Tyr'esya returns to us transformed. Farseer Elythrai sacrificed that this hybrid might carry the knowledge we sought. As she foresaw, confirmed Morai-Heg, presenting the spirit stone that contained her mentor's essence. Her final vision is fulfilled. The Tear of Morai-Heg has found a new vessel, one capable of guiding us through the approaching darkness. A human vessel, observed another counselor, disapproval evident in her tone. Our most sacred artifacts, our most profound knowledge, entrusted to a species barely emerged from barbarism. Cassandra remained silent, allowing the council their debate. The foresight granted by the Tear showed her multiple possible outcomes from this meeting, some leading to acceptance, others to rejection, all dependent on choices not yet made and words not yet spoken. What matters is not the vessel but the knowledge it carries, argued a third counselor. If this being can truly guide us against the Hive fleet's advance, and how can we trust the guidance of something neither fully kin nor fully alien? Countered another. What assurance have we that the Tear's power has not been corrupted by its integration with human consciousness? The debate continued, just as Cassandra had foreseen, the council dividing along lines of pragmatism versus traditionalism, necessity versus purity. Throughout it all, she stood in perfect stillness, a technique she had not known before the transformation, but now executed with the practiced ease of one born to it. Finally, when the arguments had exhausted themselves, the senior counselor turned his ancient gaze directly upon her. Speak, hybrid. Show us what the sacrifice of our Farseer has purchased. Cassandra raised her hands, palms upward in the traditional Eldar gesture of truth offering. As she did so, the crystalline patterns beneath her skin brightened, and from them projected a three-dimensional map of the sector, impossibly detailed, showing not just physical space but the currents of fate that flowed through it like cosmic winds. "The Hive fleet approaches from the galactic east," she began, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance that marked her transformation. "Its current vector intersects with Ulthwé's projected course in precisely 73 cycles. But this is merely the most obvious threat." The projection shifted, revealing additional patterns previously hidden beneath the surface layer: Chaos fleet movements, Imperial Navy deployments, Orc WAGH formations, even the subtle indications of Necron Tomb world activations throughout the sector. "We stand at a nexus point in galactic history," Cassandra continued. "The fall of Cadia has weakened the barriers between real space and the warp. The Great Rift expands. Ancient enemies stir from millennia of dormancy. And amidst this gathering storm, the Great Devourer advances, consuming all in its path without discrimination or mercy." The council watched in growing silence as she manipulated the projection, highlighting specific convergence points, critical decision nodes, and probability cascades that would determine the fate of not just Ulthwé but countless worlds throughout the sector. "The paths are complex but not impenetrable," she explained. "With precise interventions at key junctures, the Hive fleet's advance can be redirected, not stopped, for that is beyond any single power's capability, but channeled toward targets of opportunity that serve multiple strategic objectives simultaneously." She zoomed in on a specific star system. Here, for instance, an Imperial fortress world currently under siege by Chaos forces. If the Hive fleet's splinter tendril is guided toward this conflict, both threats will diminish each other's strength significantly. The survivors can then be eliminated with minimal Eldar casualties. For over an hour, Cassandra detailed her strategy, a masterwork of subtle manipulation, precisely calculated sacrifices, and long-term planning that reflected both Eldar patience and human adaptability. Throughout her presentation, the council's skepticism gradually transformed into reluctant appreciation, then into cautious acceptance of the hybrid perspective she offered. When she finally concluded, the chamber remained silent for several long moments as the ancient seers processed what they had witnessed. The senior counselor exchanged glances with his colleagues, unspoken communications passing between them with the efficiency of those who had worked together for millennia. "The knowledge you carry is impressive," he acknowledged finally. "Whether it will prove our salvation remains to be seen, but in the face of extinction, we cannot afford to reject any weapon, no matter how unconventional its form." He rose from his position, approaching Cassandra with measured steps. "You will be provided quarters within the Seer Council's domain. You will continue to share your insights with designated counselors who will evaluate and implement your strategies as deemed appropriate. You will not, however, be granted independent authority to act on Ulthwé's behalf." It was exactly as Cassandra had foreseen: acceptance of her knowledge without full integration into Eldar society. A pragmatic compromise that served immediate needs while maintaining the boundaries the Eldari required for their psychological comfort. "I understand," she replied simply. "I exist to serve the purpose for which I was transformed. My own status is irrelevant to that mission." The senior counselor studied her with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. "Perhaps not irrelevant," he mused, "but certainly secondary. In time, as your value is demonstrated, your position may evolve." With that qualified acceptance, the meeting concluded. Council members departed to begin implementing the first stages of the strategy Cassandra had outlined, their initial resistance tempered by the undeniable logic and foresight she had demonstrated. Soon only Morai-Heg remained with her in the now empty chamber, The young seer approached, her expression thoughtful. "You foresaw their reaction precisely," she observed. "Limited acceptance, conditional trust, strategic utilization without social integration. It was the most probable outcome," Cassandra confirmed, "and in truth, the most appropriate for all concerned. Revolutionary change is rarely beneficial to a species as long-lived as the Eldar. Gradual adaptation serves better." Morai-Heg tilted her head slightly, curious. "And does the same apply to humans? Is gradual change better for your former species as well?" "No," Cassandra replied with a hint of a smile. "Humans thrive on disruption and adaptation. It is their defining characteristic, their capacity to transform crisis into opportunity, to emerge changed but unbroken from circumstances that would shatter more rigid civilizations. Like ours," Morai-Heg acknowledged with unexpected candor. "The fall nearly destroyed us, and we have spent 10,000 years in slow decline ever since, preserving what remains rather than truly rebuilding." "Different species, different strengths," Cassandra observed. "The Eldar preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost to time. Humans forge new paths where none existed before. Both approaches have value in a galaxy beset by multiple existential threats." She turned her gaze toward a viewport that revealed Ulthwé's interior landscape, a masterpiece of wraithbone architecture and crystal gardens that represented the pinnacle of Eldari aesthetic achievement. Somewhere within that landscape, technicians were preparing the spirit stone of Farseer Elythrai for integration into the infinity circuit, where her consciousness would join the collective wisdom of generations of Ulthwé's dead. "She knew this would be the outcome," Cassandra said softly. "Not just my transformation or the Council's response, but the larger pattern, human and Eldar wisdom combined in a single consciousness, offering a perspective neither species could achieve alone." "A grand experiment," Morai-Heg agreed, "one whose results remain uncertain, as all worthy experiments must be." Cassandra turned back to the young seer who had guided her through the transformation and now stood as her primary link to Eldar society. "The convergence continues, Morai-Heg. The patterns shift and evolve with each choice we make, each action we take. I can see the possibilities, but I cannot determine which will manifest." "That responsibility falls to all of us," the young seer acknowledged. "Foresight guides, but action decides." Together, they left the council chamber, Eldar seer and hybrid oracle, representatives of what was and what might be. Before them lay challenges that would test the limits of both human adaptability and Eldar foresight. The advancing Tyranid hive fleet, the spreading corruption of chaos, the awakening of ancient enemies across the sector. But they faced these challenges with something neither species had possessed before: a bridge between worldviews, a translator of perspectives, a convergence of strengths that might, just might, be enough to navigate the gathering darkness. The last Seer of Tyr'esya had fulfilled her final vision. What would emerge from that fulfillment remained to be written in the stars. The end.